Something flickered across Emma's face, too quick to decipher, before her professional demeanor reasserted itself. "Miss Hamilton is out for the day. She mentioned a charity luncheon in the city." Of course she was. Tom closed his eyes again, the weight of reality crushing down on him. 2 months had passed since the accident, most of it spent in a specialized hospital in Reykjavik before he was stable enough to be transported back to the States. Ashley had visited daily at first, her perfect makeup never quite concealing her horror at his broken body. Then the visits had grown shorter, less frequent, until they were perfunctory appearances, brief stops between shopping excursions and social engagements. "It's time for your medication," Emma said, moving with quiet efficiency to prepare a small paper cup of pills. "And then we should change your position to prevent pressure sores." Tom turned his face away. "Just leave it. I'll take it later." "I'm afraid I can't do that, Mr. Bennett." Her voice remained gentle, but took on a firmness that surprised him. "These medications need to be taken on a schedule for maximum effectiveness." "What effectiveness?" Bitterness seeped into his words like poison. "They don't make me walk, they just make me careless that I can't." Emma set the cup down on the bedside table and pulled up a chair, sitting where he couldn't avoid her gaze, unless he closed his eyes entirely, which felt too much like surrender. "Mr. Bennett," she began, then paused. "May I call you Tom?" He gave a curt nod, irritation building at her presumed familiarity. "Tom, I understand your frustration." "No, you don't," he cut her off. "You have no idea what it's like to go from running marathons and climbing mountains to—" He gestured at his immobile lower half with disgust. "This." Emma didn't flinch at his outburst. Instead, she reached into her pocket and withdrew a worn photograph, placing it on the bed where he could see it. A smiling elderly woman sat in a garden, her unseeing eyes crinkled at the corners with joy, hands outstretched to touch a blooming rosebush. "This was my grandmother," Emma said quietly. "She lost her sight when she was 35, younger than you are now. She was a painter before that. Everyone thought she would give up, that her life was effectively over." Her fingers traced the edge of the photo with a reverence that spoke of deep love. Instead, she became a physical therapist, helping others heal through touch. She said losing her sight made her see more clearly than she ever had before. Tom stared at the photo, unwilling to acknowledge the tiny spark of interest her words had kindled. "I'm not saying your situation isn't devastating," Emma continued. "I'm saying that devastation isn't the end of the story unless you decide it is." "Did Ashley hire you to give motivational speeches along with changing bedpans?" Tom asked sarcastically. Emma's lips quirked in a half-smile that held no offense. "Actually, Miss Hamilton hired me because, and I quote, 'I don't want to ruin my magnificent nails with caretaking duties.'" She mimicked Ashley's affected tone with surprising accuracy. "The motivational speeches come free of charge." Despite himself, Tom felt a reluctant smile tug at his lips. Emma Wilson was nothing like the parade of nurses and aides Ashley had previously hired and fired, clinical professionals who treated him with detached efficiency, or worse, cloying pity. "Your medication, Tom," Emma said, holding out the paper cup again, her eyes meeting his with quiet challenge. This time he took it, washing down the pills with water from the glass she offered. "Thank you," she said, as though he had done her a favor rather than the other way around. "Now let's work on changing your position. It's important for circulation." As Emma helped shift his useless body, her movements both gentle and matter-of-fact, Tom found himself studying her. There was something about her, a centeredness, a quiet dignity, that seemed at odds with her role as a hired caretaker in a mansion filled with ostentatious luxury. "Why do you do this work?" he asked suddenly, the question escaping before he could consider it. Emma's hands paused momentarily in their task of adjusting his pillows. "Because everyone deserves care." especially when they're hurting. She smoothed a wrinkle from the bedsheet with practiced precision. And because scars aren't just closed wounds, they're maps drawn by time that teach us how to find our way home. The poetic nature of her response caught Tom off guard. It was the kind of thing that would have made him roll his eyes in his previous life, the sort of philosophical platitude spouted by those who had never faced real hardship. But coming from Emma, with her steady hands and clear eyes, the words landed differently. They settled somewhere inside him, like a seed falling into fertile but neglected soil. The windshield wipers cut through the Icelandic rain with frantic precision, each sweep revealing the magnificent landscape for mere seconds before it was swallowed again by water. Thomas Bennett, Tom to those who knew him well, gripped the steering wheel of the rented luxury SUV with white knuckles, his jaw clenched so tight that a dull ache had begun to spread through his temples. The tension in the vehicle was as palpable as the storm outside. "You're being ridiculous, Tom," Ashley said, her voice cutting through the rhythmic drumming of rain. She examined her manicured nails, the red polish catching the dim light from the dashboard. "We've been together for 3 years. It's time to make things official." Tom's eyes remained fixed on the winding coastal road ahead. The conversation was an old one, played out across restaurant tables and in the privacy of their penthouse. But never before in a foreign country, trapped in a metal box, hurtling along cliff edges. "Ashley, I'm not saying no. I'm just saying not yet." The words felt hollow even to him. At 38, Tom had built an empire in commercial real estate development, transforming skylines and amassing a fortune that allowed him any luxury he desired. Yet the thought of marriage, of permanent commitment, made his chest constrict with an anxiety he couldn't quite name. "Not yet," she mimicked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's been your answer for the past year. What are you waiting for? For me to turn 40 and lose my appeal?" Tom sighed, the sound almost lost in the howling wind that buffeted the vehicle. "That's not fair, and you know it." Iceland had been Ashley's idea, a spontaneous getaway to rekindle their romance, but 3 days into their trip, it had devolved into the same circular arguments that plagued them in New York. He'd hoped. The raw beauty of this place, with its vast glaciers and fields of volcanic rock, might ignite something new within him, some certainty about their future together. The rain intensified, sheets of water now cascading across the windshield faster than the wipers could clear them. Visibility had reduced to mere yards ahead, the road becoming a slick, treacherous ribbon. "Slow down, Tom," Ashley said, her annoyance suddenly giving way to concern as she gripped the door handle. "I am slowing down," he replied, easing his foot off the accelerator and feeling the car respond. But something wasn't right. The steering felt loose, disconnected. A flicker of alarm sparked in his mind as the SUV began to drift, ever so slightly, toward the guardrail that separated the road from a steep drop to the churning sea below. In that moment, time seemed to stretch. Tom could feel each heartbeat, each breath. He saw Ashley's perfectly arranged features twist in slow-motion realization. He saw the rain droplets suspended on the glass like tiny crystal orbs. He felt the tires lose their grip on the wet asphalt. And in that suspended moment, as the vehicle began its inevitable slide toward the guardrail, Tom made a split-second decision. With deliberate force, he turned the wheel sharply left, away from Ashley's side of the car. The maneuver was instinctual, protective, a final answer to her question about his commitment. The last thing Tom registered before impact was the metallic taste of fear in his mouth and the strange clarity of a single thought. Some questions can only be answered in the moment of crisis. Then came the crash. Metal against metal. Glass shattering, the sickening crunch of the driver's side door collapsing inward. Pain exploded through his body, radiating from his spine outward in white-hot tendrils, and then, mercifully, darkness. Mr. Bennett, can you hear me? I need you to open your eyes if you can. The voice penetrated the fog of Tom's consciousness, soft but insistent like waves gradually eroding a cliff face. He struggled to comply, his eyelids seeming to weigh tons. When he finally managed to part them, the world appeared as a blur of whites and greys, punctuated by a face hovering above him. "There you are," the face said, resolving slowly into the features of a woman perhaps in her early 30s, with chestnut hair pulled back into a practical ponytail, and eyes that reminded Tom of the sea on a calm day, deep, clear, and somehow knowing. "My name is Emma Wilson. I'm your home care nurse." Home. The word triggered a cascade of confusion. This wasn't his penthouse in Manhattan. The ceiling was familiar yet strange, the vaulted beams of his rarely used Hamptons mansion. The realization came with fragments of memory: Iceland, the crash, the hospital, the diagnosis, paraplegia, a severe spinal cord injury. The doctors carefully measured tones as they explained that he might never walk again. "Where's Ashley?" The words scratched his throat, his voice unfamiliar to his own ears. He said nothing more as she finished her tasks, but when she turned to leave, he found himself watching her retreating form with a strange reluctance to see her go. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the master bedroom, painting golden rectangles across the polished hardwood floor. Tom lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the sound of ocean waves breaking against the shore, a constant reminder of the world continuing without him. 3 weeks had passed since Emma Wilson had entered his life, bringing her quiet competence and unsolicited wisdom into his carefully constructed isolation. The door opened, and Ashley swept in, a vision in designer athleisure wear, her blonde hair swept into a perfect ponytail, not a strand out of place even after what she called her morning constitutional, a brisk walk along the beach for the benefit of her Instagram followers. "You're awake," she observed, maintaining a careful distance from the hospital bed that now dominated the room. "Emma should be here soon. I've got to run into the city for lunch with the Carmichaels. Fundraiser planning, you know how it is." She spoke with the bright, artificial cheeriness one might use with an elderly relative who couldn't quite follow the conversation. "I know exactly how it is," Tom replied, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "The Carmichaels don't start planning their autumn gala until August. It's May." Ashley's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, there are other matters to discuss. Portia's daughter is getting married in the fall, and she wants my input on venues." "Of course she does." The bitterness in his tone was unmistakable now. Ashley sighed dramatically, perching on the edge of an armchair several feet from the bed. "What do you want from me, Tom? I'm trying. This isn't easy for me either, you know." The laugh that escaped him was harsh, scraping against his throat like broken glass. "Not easy for you. Please enlighten me about your suffering, Ashley." "That's not fair." Her perfectly plucked eyebrows drew together in a practiced expression of hurt. "I've put my life on hold. I've moved out to this godforsaken beach house to be with you. I've hired the best care money can buy." "You've hired someone to deal with me so you don't have to," Tom corrected, the truth of it settling like a stone in his stomach. "When was the last time you touched me, Ashley? Really? Touched me, not just patted my hand before rushing off to another engagement?" Ashley stood abruptly, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her leggings. "I'm not having this conversation when you're in one of your moods. The accident changed you, Tom. You're so angry all the time." "The accident didn't change me," Tom said quietly, the realization dawning as the words left his mouth. "It just revealed who we both really are." The doorbell chimed through the house, saving Ashley from having to respond. Relief washed over her features. "That'll be Emma. I'll let her in on my way out." Tom watched her go, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air. The woman he'd been planning to propose to, eventually, when the timing felt right, now seemed like a stranger, a beautiful facade with nothing of substance beneath. Minutes later, Emma appeared, carrying a tray with breakfast and his morning medications. Her presence brought a different energy into the room, less polished than Ashley's, but more genuine. She wore simple jeans and a soft sweater, her hair secured in its usual practical ponytail, her face free of makeup, save for a hint of lip balm. "Good morning," she greeted, setting the tray on the adjustable table beside his bed. "How are you? Feeling today?" "Like a man who's lost the use of his legs and is trapped in a house with a fiancée who can barely stand to look at him," Tom replied bluntly. "So, same as yesterday." Emma nodded, accepting his answer without the flinching sympathy or uncomfortable topic changing that had become Ashley's standard response. "I thought we might try something different today," she said, adjusting the bed to a sitting position with practiced efficiency. "Different how?" Suspicion colored his tone. "I've brought some physical therapy exercises we can do here, rather than waiting for the PT to visit tomorrow." She moved to the windows, drawing back the curtains fully to let in more light. "And I thought afterward, if you're up for it, we might go out to the garden terrace. The sea air would do you good." Tom felt resistance rise within him like a wall. "What's the point? So I can watch seagulls fly while I sit immobile in a wheelchair? So the neighbors can gawk at what's become of the great Thomas Bennett?" Emma turned to face him, her expression neither pitying nor judgmental. "The point is that there's a world outside these four walls, and you're still part of it, whether you choose to engage with it or not." "That's easy for you to say," Tom shot back. "You get to walk out of here at the end of your shift. You get to choose your path." "We all have paths we didn't choose," Emma replied, her voice taking on a hint of steel beneath its usual gentleness. "The question is what we do on the path we find ourselves on. More fortune cookie wisdom?" Tom scoffed, even as a part of him hungered for her steadfast perspective. Emma approached the bed, her movements unhurried. "You know what I think, Tom? I think you're not really angry about being in that chair. I think you're angry because the accident showed you truths you were trying not to see." The accuracy of her assessment struck him like a physical blow. "You don't know anything about me or my life," he defended weakly. "I know that before. The accident, you were engaged to a woman who now can't bear to be in the same room with you for more than 5 minutes, Emma said, her bluntness surprising him. "I know that despite your wealth and success, not a single friend has visited in the 3 weeks I've been here. I know that when you look at your legs, you see only what you've lost, not what you still have." Tom felt exposed, as if Emma had peeled back his skin to reveal the tangled mess of emotions beneath. Anger, pride, and fear warred within him, creating a storm he could neither control nor escape. "What exactly do I still have?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Tell me, since you seem to have all the answers." "You have a mind that's uninjured," she replied steadily. "You have hands that can create, eyes that can see beauty, a heart that can feel, even if right now it only wants to feel rage." She paused, her gaze holding his. "You have a choice about who you become in response to this tragedy, and that, Tom, is more than many people ever have." Her words hung in the air between them, challenging and unavoidable. Tom wanted to dismiss them, to retreat back into the comfortable numbness of his bitterness, but something about Emma's quiet certainty made that impossible. "I don't know how to be this person," he admitted finally, the confession dragged from some deep place he'd been avoiding. "I don't know how to be helpless." Emma's expression softened, but not into pity, into understanding. "No one does, at first. But you don't have to figure it out all at once." She gestured to the breakfast tray. "Right now, all you have to do is eat your breakfast. Then we'll try one small exercise. Then maybe, if it feels right, 10 minutes on the terrace. The simplicity of the plan, the absence of grand expectations or demands for instant transformation, offered a tiny glimmer of relief. Tom looked at the tray, then back at Emma, waging an internal battle between his entrenched resistance and the whisper of possibility she represented. 10 minutes, he conceded finally, but only if you stop spouting philosophical nonsense. Emma's smile crinkled the corners of her eyes in a way that made her look younger, less careworn. I make no promises about the philosophical nonsense, she said, handing him his fork. That comes with the territory. As Tom began to eat, he felt something shift inside him. Not a dramatic breakthrough, but the smallest crack in the wall. He'd built around himself. It was uncomfortable, even painful, but there was also a kind of relief in it, like the first breath after being underwater too long. The wheelchair rolled smoothly across the polished concrete of the garden terrace, coming to rest near the glass balustrade that overlooked the Atlantic Ocean. Tom inhaled deeply, the salt-laden air filling his lungs with a sharpness that felt both foreign and familiar after weeks confined indoors. It had been a month since his first venture outside with Emma, and these daily excursions to the terrace had become a ritual, one he reluctantly admitted he looked forward to. Perfect timing, Emma said, setting a pitcher of water infused, with cucumber and mint on the table beside him. The container garden was just delivered. I thought perhaps you might help me arrange the plants. Tom raised an eyebrow skeptically. I'm not exactly known for my green thumb. All the more reason to develop one now, Emma replied, with that matter-of-fact tone that somehow made her suggestions feel less like charity and more like logical next steps. Besides, it's good occupational therapy for your hands, she gestured, to the collection of small pots containing herbs and flowers that had been placed nearby. Tom noticed that each pot was lightweight, designed for easy handling by someone with limited strength or mobility. Did you special order these? He asked, picking up a small clay pot containing what appeared to be basil. Emma nodded, a hint of color touching her cheeks. I took the liberty. Dr. Reeves mentioned that activities engaging fine motor skills would be beneficial, and I thought this might be more appealing than the standard therapy exercises. The thought she had put into this, the consideration for his dignity as well as his physical needs, created a warm sensation in Tom's chest that he wasn't quite ready to acknowledge. Well, I suppose I can try not to kill a few plants, he conceded, examining the basil leaves between his fingers. The texture was velvety, aromatic, a sensory experience that momentarily distracted him from the constant awareness of his useless legs. As they worked side by side, arranging the container garden along the terrace rail, Emma kept up a gentle flow of conversation about the different plants and their uses. Tom found himself responding, asking questions, even occasionally offering suggestions about placement based on aesthetic considerations, an echo of the design sensibility that had made him successful in real estate development. You have an eye for balance, Emma observed, as he repositioned a flowering lavender plant to create a visual complement to the trailing thyme beside it. I used to design buildings, Tom said, the words emerging more easily than he expected. Not the architectural specifics, but the overall vision, how a structure would fit into its environment, how it would enhance rather than dominate the landscape. Emma paused in her work, giving him her full attention, a gift she seemed to offer effortlessly, making whoever she was listening to feel momentarily like the center of the universe. That explains why you've been rearranging things in your bedroom, she said with a small smile. I noticed the books and photographs keep migrating to different positions. Tom hadn't realized she'd noticed these small adjustments. His attempts to exert some control over his environment when so much else remained beyond his reach. It gives me something to do during those long hours when I can't sleep, he admitted. Pain keeping you awake? She asked, her clinical training evident in the precise way she formulated the question. Tom hesitated, then decided on honesty. Sometimes, but mostly it's the dreams. Dreams, Emma prompted gently, her hands continuing their work with the plants, allowing him the dignity of a conversation that didn't feel like therapy. I dream I'm running, he said, his voice dropping lower. Along a beach, up a mountain, through city streets. And it feels so real that when I wake up and can't move. He trailed off, unable to articulate the crushing weight of that daily rediscovery. Emma nodded, her silence an invitation to continue rather than an uncomfortable void to be filled. When he didn't speak further, she shared instead. My grandmother used to say that dreams where we can do the impossible aren't taunting us with what we've lost. They're reminding us of what our spirits are still capable of. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, leaving a smudge of soil on her cheek. She dreamed of painting after she went blind, said those dreams kept her creative spirit alive until she found new ways to express it. Tom wanted to dismiss this as more of Emma's philosophical musings, but found he couldn't. There was something compelling about the way she found meaning in difficulty, not in a facile greeting card manner, but with a depth that suggested lived experience. Your grandmother sounds like quite a woman, he said instead. She was, Emma agreed, a flash of sadness crossing her features. She raised me after my parents died, taught me everything I know about caring for others. This was new information. In the weeks they'd spent together, Emma had revealed little about her personal life, focusing instead on Tom's needs and recovery. I'm sorry about your parents, he offered, the words feeling inadequate but sincere. Thank you, she replied simply. It was a long time ago. Before Tom could respond, the glass doors to the terrace slid open and Ashley appeared, dressed, immaculately in a white designer dress, her hair and makeup flawless, despite the coastal humidity. There you are, she said, her tone suggesting mild annoyance at having to search for him. The Richardsons are coming for drinks at 6. I need you presentable. Tom felt his newfound peace evaporate, replaced by a familiar tension. The Richardsons? Since when? Since I ran into Margaret at Bergdorf's yesterday and mentioned we were out at the beach house, Ashley replied, as if this explained everything. They're summering in Southampton and wanted to drop by. I could hardly say no. Actually, you could have, Tom said, aware of Emma quietly continuing her work, though he suspected she was missing nothing of the exchange, especially since you didn't bother to consult me. Ashley's perfect features arranged themselves into an expression of exasperated patience. Don't be difficult, Tom. They're your friends too, and frankly, it's time you started seeing people again. This hermit existence isn't healthy. The irony of Ashley suddenly concerning herself with his social health wasn't lost on Tom. The Richardsons aren't my friends. They're business associates who you like because they have a house in Aspen and a yacht in Monaco. Well, they're coming, Ashley stated firmly, checking her watch, which means you need to be showered and dressed in proper clothes, not those depressing sweatpants. Emma, can you manage that? Did the dismissive way Ashley addressed Emma, as if she were merely an extension of Tom's wheelchair, ignited a flash of anger in his chest. Emma has been arranging a garden with me, Tom said, his voice taking on a protective edge that surprised him. She's not a personal valet, Emma intervened before the tension could escalate further. It's no trouble. We were just finishing up here. She wiped her hands on a small towel. I'll help Mr. Bennett prepare for your guests. Ashley barely acknowledged this with a nod before turning back to Tom. Wear the navy blazer. It's slimming and hides the... She gestured vaguely at his atrophying legs. Changes. After she disappeared back into the house, An uncomfortable silence descended on the terrace. Tom stared out at the ocean, his earlier contentment now soured. "You don't have to defend me to Miss Hamilton," Emma said finally, her tone neutral. "It's part of my job to assist with personal care." Tom turned to look at her, struck by the quiet dignity she maintained despite Ashley's condescension. "It's not about the task, it's about how she asked," he replied. "You deserve respect." A small smile touched Emma's lips. "Thank you, but I've developed a fairly thick skin over the years." "That doesn't make it acceptable," Tom insisted, surprised by how strongly he felt about this. Emma studied him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "You know, a month ago you wouldn't have noticed, much less objected." The observation gave Tom pause. She was right. When Emma had first arrived, he'd been too consumed by his own pain and anger to register much about how others were treated, including her. "I guess I'm making progress," he said, a hint of wry humor in his voice. "You are," Emma agreed, her tone warming with genuine approval. "More than you realize." As she wheeled him back toward the house to prepare for the unwanted social obligation ahead, Tom found himself dwelling on her words. Progress. Such a simple concept, yet so difficult to recognize from within the slow, painful crawl of daily existence. But perhaps she was right. Perhaps something was shifting, not in his useless legs, but in the parts of him that still functioned. His mind, his perception, his capacity for empathy. It wasn't much. It wouldn't impress the Richardsons or satisfy Ashley's desire for a return to normalcy. But as Emma helped him navigate the transition from outdoor to indoor light, her hands steady and sure on the handles of his wheelchair, Tom allowed himself to acknowledge that it was something. A small victory in a war he hadn't even realized he was fighting, not against his broken body, but against the breaking of his spirit. The physical therapy room, converted from what had once been a home gym filled with equipment Tom now couldn't use, echoed with his labored breathing. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he struggled to complete the series of upper body exercises Dr. Kaplan had prescribed. His arms trembled with exertion as he pulled down on the resistance bands for the 20th repetition. "2 more," Emma encouraged. From beside him, her voice steady. "You've got this." "I don't," Tom grunted, pain shooting through his shoulders. "Have this." "Yes, you do," she insisted without sympathy or coddling. "Your body is stronger than you think. It's your mind that wants to quit." With a growl of frustration that was half anger and half determination, Tom completed the final 2 reps. The resistance bands snapped back as he released them, and he slumped in his wheelchair, chest heaving. "There," Emma said, handing him a towel and a water bottle. "That's progress." Tom wiped his face, irritation flaring. Progress would be standing up and walking out of this room. Emma knelt in front of his wheelchair, meeting his gaze directly, a habit of hers that both unsettled and grounded him. "Progress isn't just the destination, Tom. It's every step along the way." "More wisdom from Grandmother Wilson?" he asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "Actually, that one's from me," she replied with a small smile, unperturbed by his sarcasm. "Learned the hard way." Before Tom could respond, a sound from the doorway drew their attention. A small figure stood there, a child, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, with Emma's chestnut hair styled in neat braids and wide, curious eyes that took in the room and its occupants with undisguised interest. "Mommy, is this the man you're helping?" "To get better?" the little girl asked, her voice carrying clearly across the room. Tom's gaze snapped to Emma, whose cheeks had flushed with color. "Lily, what are you doing here?" She rose quickly, moving to the doorway. "Mrs. Patel had a dentist appointment, so she dropped me off early," the child explained, looking past Emma to study Tom with frank curiosity. "Uncle Dave said you were in here." Tom felt a surge of disorientation. Emma had a daughter, and who was Uncle Dave? In all the weeks she'd been working with him, Emma had never mentioned a child, though now that he thought about it, she always left promptly at the end of her shift and never accepted overtime, regardless of Ashley's imperious demands. "I'm so sorry about this," Emma said, turning back to Tom. "My brother sometimes fills in as your security guard when your regular guy needs a day off. He brought Lily here because my babysitter had an emergency." The pieces clicked into place, but Tom still felt wrong-footed. "You never mentioned you had a daughter." A flash of something, defensiveness, pride, crossed Emma's face. "It never came up in your care plan." The clinical terminology created an unexpected sting. Was that all he was to her? A care plan? A job? The thought bothered him more than it should have. "Hi, I'm Lily," the little girl announced, having apparently decided adult conversation was taking too long. She approached Tom's wheelchair without hesitation, stopping at a respectful distance but meeting his eyes directly, just like her mother. "You have a really nice house. It's like a castle." Despite his discomfort, Tom found his lips twitching toward a smile at her directness. "It's too big for one person," he heard himself reply. "Then why do you live here all alone?" Lily asked, her head tilting in genuine confusion. "Lily," Emma said in a warning tone, "Mr. Bennett isn't alone. He has your mother and other staff to help him, and his fiancée visits often." The word fiancé felt hollow in Tom's ears. Ashley hadn't spent a night at the beach house in over 2 weeks, citing a busy social calendar in the city. Their interactions had become increasingly perfunctory. She would sweep in, update him on plans he wasn't included in, ask distracted questions about his recovery that she never waited to hear the answers to, and then disappear again in a cloud of expensive perfume. "I want to be a physical therapist like Grandma was," Lily announced, seemingly uninterested in the topic of Ashley. "Mommy says Grandma helped people find their strength again after they got hurt." Tom glanced at Emma, surprised once more. "Your grandmother was a physical therapist? The one who went blind?" Emma nodded, her expression softening at the mention of her grandmother. "Yes. She specialized in rehabilitation after spinal injuries, actually. Many of the techniques I've been using with you are ones she developed." This revelation shifted something in Tom's understanding. The exercises Emma had been guiding him through, which had seemed intuitive and personalized in a way the professional PT's rigid protocols hadn't, weren't random. They were the legacy of a woman who had transformed her own tragedy into a way to help others. "Can I show him, Mommy?" Lily asked suddenly, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "Can I show him the butterfly thing?" Emma hesitated, glancing at Tom. "I don't think now is the time, sweetie. Mr. Bennett has just finished a difficult session and needs to rest." "What's the butterfly thing?" Tom found himself asking, curiosity overriding his earlier discomfort. Lily beamed, taking his question. "As permission, it's where you find the sleeping nerves and wake them up." She wiggled her fingers in demonstration. "Grandma taught Mommy and Mommy taught me." Emma sighed, recognizing defeat. "It's a sensory stimulation technique my grandmother developed," she explained to Tom. "It uses light touch and specific patterns to stimulate nerve responses in patients. With spinal injuries, there's actual science behind it, despite Lily's colorful description." "Does it work?" Tom asked, a fragile tendril of hope unfurling despite his best efforts to remain cynical. "Sometimes," Emma answered honestly. "It's not a miracle cure, but it can help establish new neural pathways in some cases." Tom looked from mother to daughter, considering. The formal PT sessions with the specialist Ashley had hired were grueling and clinical, focused on maintaining muscle tone and preventing further atrophy rather than on recovery. The possibility of something different, something that acknowledged the potential for improvement rather than just maintenance, was alluring. "Show me," he said finally, directing the words to Lily, whose face lit up with delight. "Really, Tom?" Emma interjected. "You're exhausted, and Lily isn't a trained professional." "I want to see what she can do," Tom interrupted, surprising himself with the firmness of his decision. "Please." Emma studied him for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "All right, but only for a few minutes." Lily approached Tom's wheelchair with the solemn concentration of a child entrusted with an important task. Emma knelt beside her daughter, guiding her through proper positioning. "Remember what I taught?" "You," Emma said softly, gentle but firm, following the pattern. Tom watched, skepticism warring with curiosity, as Lily placed her small hands just above his knees. Even through the fabric of his sweatpants, he could feel the warmth of her touch. A strange sensation, given that he couldn't feel pressure or movement in the same area. "The butterflies start here," Lily explained seriously, her fingers moving in delicate patterns that reminded Tom of the insects she described. "They fly up and down, waking up the sleeping parts." Emma supervised closely, occasionally adjusting her daughter's hand positions with murmured guidance. "That's it. Now along the lateral line, just like I showed you." Tom remained silent, focusing on the sensation or lack thereof. For several minutes, there was nothing but the rhythmic movement of the child's hands and the sound of her concentrated breathing. Then, just as he was about to suggest they stop the charade, he felt it, a whisper of a sensation so faint he might have imagined it, a tingling, like the static electricity that precedes a shock, running from his upper thigh downward. His sharp intake of breath made both Emma and Lily look up. "Did you feel something?" Emma asked, her professional demeanor giving way to an intensity that caught Tom off guard. "I don't know," he admitted, afraid to claim a victory that might prove false. "Maybe. A tingling. Just for a second." Emma's expression remained carefully neutral, but he caught the flicker of excitement in her eyes. "Where exactly?" Tom indicated the spot, and Emma nodded, making a mental note. "Lily, that's enough for today. Thank you for showing Mr. Bennett your butterfly technique." The little girl beamed with pride. "Did I wake up the sleeping nerves?" "You might have given them a little nudge," Emma replied, ruffling her daughter's hair affectionately. "Now, why don't you go find Uncle Dave and ask him if he'll help you get a snack from the kitchen?" Once Lily had skipped from the room, Emma turned back to Tom, her expression serious. "I don't want you to get your hopes up too much about that sensation. It could be many things. A phantom feeling, a muscle spasm, referred sensation from above the injury site." Tom appreciated her honesty, even as disappointment threatened to dampen the tiny spark of hope that had ignited within him. "But it could also be a nerve response." "It could be," she acknowledged. "Dr. Kaplan mentioned that your injury, while severe, isn't a complete transaction. There's always been a possibility of some recovery, however limited." The careful way she phrased this, hedged with qualifiers and tempered expectations, told Tom she'd deliberately avoided discussing this possibility before, perhaps fearing he wasn't ready for the emotional roller coaster of hope and potential disappointment. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" he asked, unable to keep a hint of accusation from his voice. Emma met his gaze steadily. "Because hope is powerful medicine, but false hope can be poison. I needed to know you were strong enough to handle the uncertainty, to keep working, even if nothing changes." Her assessment stung, but Tom couldn't deny its accuracy. A few weeks ago, he might have seized on the slightest improvement as proof that full recovery was imminent, then crashed into deeper despair when reality failed to match his expectations. "And now? You think I'm ready?" The question emerged more vulnerable than he'd intended. "I think you're starting to see that improvement doesn't have to mean walking out of here tomorrow," Emma replied. "That finding strength doesn't always look the way we expect it to." Tom contemplated her words as she helped him transfer from the exercise chair back to his wheelchair. The process had become smoother over the weeks, his upper body strength increasing with the consistent training regimen Emma had designed. "Your daughter is remarkable," he said finally, steering the conversation away from the emotional terrain that felt too exposed. "She has your directness." Emma laughed, the sound unexpectedly light and musical. "That's a diplomatic way of saying she speaks her mind without filter. But yes, she's quite something. I'm sorry for the interruption to your session." "Don't be," Tom replied, surprising himself with his sincerity. "It was the most interesting therapy I've had yet." As Emma wheeled him back toward his bedroom suite, Tom found himself thinking about the brief glimpse he'd been given into her personal life. She was a single mother, it seemed, raising a precocious daughter while working full-time, caring for others. Her brother filled in as security staff when needed. Her grandmother had been both her parent figure and professional inspiration. These fragments painted a picture of a woman whose life was far more complex and rich than he'd allowed himself to consider. "Will Lily be staying here today?" he asked as they reached his suite. Emma nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Just until my shift ends. My brother will keep her occupied. She won't disturb you again." "She wasn't a disturbance," Tom corrected, then hesitated before adding, "She could come back if she wants. I don't mind." The surprise that flickered across Emma's face made Tom realize just how isolated he had become, how completely he had withdrawn from normal human interaction since the accident. That a child's visit could register as a notable event rather than an ordinary occurrence spoke volumes about the sterile bubble he'd been existing in. "That's very kind of you," Emma said carefully, "but I don't want to impose." "It's not an imposition," Tom insisted, then added with a hint of his old dry humor, "Besides, those sleeping nerves might need more butterfly wake-up calls." Emma's professional mask slipped, revealing a genuine smile that transformed her features, making her look younger and more vibrant. "Well, in that case, I'm sure Lily would be delighted to practice her technique again. She takes her future career as a physical therapist very seriously." As she helped him transfer from the wheelchair to his adjustable bed, Tom found himself looking forward to the child's return. A novel sensation after months of dreading each day and the reminders of limitation it brought. The tingling sensation in his leg had likely been nothing significant, a random nerve firing or simple wishful thinking. But the spark of connection with Lily and the glimpse into Emma's world beyond her role as his caretaker, these felt like genuine progress, steps towards something he hadn't even known he was seeking. "Again," Tom instructed, his voice tight with concentration. "One more time." Sweat beaded on his forehead as he focused intently on his right foot, willing the toes to move. Beside him, Lily watched with the solemn attention of a surgical assistant, her small face screwed up in sympathetic effort. "You can do it, Mr. Tom," she encouraged, using the name she'd adopted for him in the 2 weeks since her first appearance in the therapy room. "The butterflies are awake now. They just need to remember how to dance." Emma observed from a few feet away, maintaining professional distance while allowing this unorthodox session to continue. Though she'd initially been hesitant about involving Lily in Tom's therapy, she couldn't deny the results. Since that first day, Tom had reported increased sensations in his lower extremities, intermittent tingling, occasional muscle spasms, and today, the first deliberate movement, a barely perceptible twitch of his big toe. "There!" Lily exclaimed, pointing excitedly. "I saw it move." Tom exhaled shakily, his eyes fixed on his foot. "Again," he murmured, more to himself than to his audience. Sweat dripped down his temple as he concentrated with an intensity that would have exhausted him mentally and physically a month earlier. The toe twitched again, a tiny movement, but unmistakably voluntary. Emma stepped forward, her clinical training warring with the hope blooming in her chest. "That's enough for today, Tom. You don't want to overexert yourself." "Just one more," he insisted, the familiar stubbornness creeping into his tone. "The nerves are like muscles," Emma explained gently. "They can get tired too. Pushing too hard might set you back." Tom looked up at her, frustration flashing in his eyes before understanding took its place. He nodded reluctantly, resting back against his chair. "You're right, I want to build on this." "And you will," Emma assured him, moving to help adjust his position. "But recovery isn't linear. There will be good days and setbacks. What matters is the overall trajectory." Lily, who had been quietly listening to this exchange, piped up with her characteristic directness. "Grandma always said healing happens in spirals, not straight lines. You go around and around, sometimes closer and sometimes farther, but always moving toward the center." Tom and Emma exchanged surprised glances, both struck by the wisdom from such a young source. "Your grandmother sounds like she was very smart," Tom said to Lily, a smile softening his features in a way that still caught Emma off guard. When he smiled, really smiled, not the sardonic twist of lips that had been his standard expression early in his recovery, he looked younger, more approachable. Glimpses of the man he must have been before pain and bitterness had etched themselves into his face. "The smartest," Lily agreed solemnly. "Mum says I'm just like her, except I can see with my eyes." "You certainly have her insight," Emma said, ruffling her daughter's hair affectionately. "Now why don't you go wash your hands? It's almost time for lunch." As Lily skipped from the room, Tom's eyes followed her with an expression Emma couldn't quite decipher. "She's changed everything, hasn't she?" he said quietly, not looking at Emma. "Your daughter." Emma paused in her task of organizing the therapy equipment. "How do you mean?" Tom gestured vaguely with his hand. "This, me, the whole approach. Before she burst in here with her butterflies and her grandmother's wisdom, we were following the standard protocol, maintaining, not really hoping." The observation was astute, and Emma couldn't deny its truth. "Children see possibilities where adults see limitations," she acknowledged. "It's one of their gifts." "It's more than that," Tom insisted. "You've been different since she's been coming here, less guarded, more—" He searched for the word invested. Emma felt a flush rise to her cheeks, uncomfortable with his perception. Had she truly been holding back, maintaining professional distance as a shield? Perhaps she had. Tom Bennett represented everything she usually avoided in her work: wealth, privilege, complicated emotions. She preferred cases with clear boundaries, where her role was defined and limited. Yet somehow, those boundaries had blurred. "I've always been invested in your recovery," she said carefully. "As a patient," Tom clarified. "But now it's different. Now it's personal." Before Emma could formulate a response that neither crossed professional lines nor denied the truth, Ashley's voice cut through the moment like a shard of glass. "What exactly is going on here?" Emma turned to find Ashley standing in the doorway, impeccably dressed as always, her cool gaze sweeping from Tom to Emma with undisguised suspicion. "Physical therapy," Tom replied, his tone shifting instantly to the clipped, defensive one he typically used with Ashley these days. "Emma and Lily have been helping me work on nerve regeneration techniques." "Lily?" Ashley repeated, arching a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Who is Lily?" "My daughter," Emma supplied, straightening to her full height, though she still stood several inches shorter than Ashley in her designer heels. "She's been assisting with some alternative therapy approaches that seem to be yielding positive results." Ashley's expression made it clear what she thought of alternative therapy approaches being administered by a child. "I see. And does Dr. Kaplan approve of these approaches?" Dr. Kaplan is aware of our supplementary techniques, Emma replied, truthfully, admitting that the doctor had been skeptical but unwilling to forbid anything that might boost his patient's morale. I've had movement in my toes, Tom interjected, a challenge in his voice. For the first time since the accident. Something flashed across Ashley's face. Surprise, certainly, but something else too. Discomfort? Concern? It vanished before Emma could identify it definitively. That's wonderful, darling, Ashley said, her tone not quite matching her words. She approached Tom, placing a perfectly manicured hand on his shoulder in what appeared to be a gesture of support, though she was careful not to disarrange her silk blouse in the process. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Dr. Kaplan said false hope could be damaging psychologically. Tom shrugged off her touch, his jaw tightening. It's not false hope when I can see my own toe moving, Ashley. An uncomfortable silence descended on the room. Emma began gathering her supplies, sensing the need to give the couple privacy for what was clearly developing into a personal discussion. I'll just check on Lily, she murmured, heading for the door. Actually, Emma, please stay, Tom said, his voice carrying an authority that hadn't been present in the early days of his recovery. I'd like you to explain to Ashley exactly what progress we've been making. Ashley's mouth thinned with displeasure, but she said nothing as Emma outlined the developments of the past 2 weeks, the increased sensation, the muscle responses, and today's voluntary movement. She kept her explanation clinical and measured, careful not to overpromise or exaggerate, even as she acknowledged the positive signs. So you're saying he might walk again? Ashley asked when Emma had finished, her voice carefully neutral. I'm saying there are encouraging signs of neural activity below the injury site, Emma corrected. Recovery from spinal trauma exists on a spectrum. Some patients regain significant function, others experience limited improvement. It's too soon to make definitive predictions, Ashley nodded, her expression unreadable. Well, this certainly changes things. She turned to Tom, her perfect smile not quite reaching her eyes. We should celebrate. I'll cancel my plans for this evening and stay for dinner. We can discuss what these developments might mean for our future. Tom's expression remained guarded. I actually have more therapy scheduled this evening. Emma has been working with me on a new routine. Surely Emma could use an evening off, Ashley suggested, her tone honey-sweet, but her eyes sharp as she glanced at Emma. Family obligations, and all that. Before Emma could respond, Lily appeared in the doorway, her face lighting up at the sight of Ashley. Hi, are you Mr. Tom's princess? You look like a princess from my storybook. Ashley's composure faltered momentarily at the child's direct address. I'm Ashley Hamilton, Tom's fiancée, she corrected, her smile stiff. I'm Lily, the child replied, unperturbed by Ashley's coolness. I'm helping Mr. Tom wake up his sleeping legs. I'm going to be a physical therapist like my grandma when I grow up. Is that so? Ashley responded with the polite disinterest of someone unaccustomed to conversing with children. How ambitious! Emma moved to her daughter's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Lily, this is Miss Hamilton. She and Mr. Bennett need to talk privately. Let's go prepare lunch, shall we? As Emma guided Lily from the room, she heard Ashley's voice drop to a whisper, though not low enough to prevent her from catching the words, Really, Tom? You're putting your recovery in the hands of a housekeeper and her child instead of qualified medical professionals? Emma quickened her pace, steering Lily toward the kitchen before she could hear Tom's response. Her cheeks burned with a mixture of anger and humiliation. Housekeeper. The dismissive term revealed all too clearly how Ashley viewed her, despite her medical training and the progress Tom had made under her care. In the kitchen, Emma busied herself with Lily's lunch, using the routine task to regain her composure. She reminded herself that Ashley's opinion shouldn't matter. What mattered was Tom's recovery, which was progressing more rapidly than anyone had anticipated. If Ashley Hamilton couldn't see the value in that because it came through unconventional channels, that was her limitation, not Emma's. Still, the encounter had left a bitter taste in her mouth, a reminder of the vast social chasm that separated her world from Tom's. She might be helping him find his way back to physical capability, but once he no longer needed her services, their paths would diverge once more. He would return to his life of privilege and power, and she would move on to the next patient, the next case, the next paycheck to support herself and Lily. Emma was so absorbed in these thoughts that she didn't hear Tom enter the kitchen in his wheelchair until he spoke. "I apologize for Ashley," he said quietly. Emma turned, startled, to find him in the doorway, his expression troubled. "There's no need to apologize," she replied automatically. "Miss Hamilton is understandably protective of your care." "No," Tom countered, wheeling himself further into the kitchen. "She's understandably threatened by the progress I'm making with you and Lily, because it doesn't fit into her narrative of the helpless fiancé who needs her condescending pity." The bitterness in his voice was palpable. Emma hesitated, uncomfortable with this characterization of his relationship, however accurate it might be. "It's not my place to comment on your personal relationships, Tom, even when they directly impact your work, your dignity." Tom pressed his eyes, searching hers. "I heard what she called you, Emma, and I want you to know that's not how I see you, not at all." The intensity of his gaze made Emma look away, focusing instead on cutting Lily's sandwich into triangles the way she preferred. "It doesn't matter how either of you see me," she said quietly. "What matters is your recovery." "It matters to me," Tom insisted. Before Emma could respond, Lily piped up from her seat at the kitchen island. "Mr. Tom, are you going to eat lunch with us?" "Mum made turkey sandwiches. They're the best sandwich in the whole world." The tension in the room dissipated with the child's innocent question. Tom's serious expression softened as he looked at Lily. "Is that so? Well, I wouldn't want to miss the best sandwich in the whole world." As Emma added another place setting to their impromptu lunch gathering, she felt something shift in the atmosphere of the beach house. A subtle reordering of alliances and priorities. For the first time since she'd arrived, Tom seemed to be making choices independent of Ashley's expectations or his own self-imposed isolation. Whether those choices would lead to healing or further complications remained to be seen. What was clear, as she watched Tom engage with Lily in a conversation about the relative merits of various sandwich fillings, was that his recovery had entered a new phase. He was no longer merely a patient following a prescribed regimen or a bitter man raging against his circumstances. He was actively participating in his own healing, finding new pathways forward, not just neurologically, but emotionally as well. And that, Emma reflected as she joined them at the table, might ultimately prove more significant than any physical progress, however miraculous. The atmosphere in the beach house had shifted palpably over the past month. What had once been a sterile, museum-like space now bore signs of life and activity. Books left open on side tables, the container garden flourishing on the terrace, Lily's colourful drawings taped to the refrigerator door. Even the staff moved with greater ease, no longer tiptoeing around their employers' dark moods. Tom sat in his wheelchair beside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the living room, reviewing. Architectural plans spread across a drafting table that had been adjusted to his height. The summer sun streamed in, illuminating not just the papers, but the changes in Tom himself. The improved muscle tone in his arms and shoulders, the healthier color in his face, the focus in his eyes that had replaced vacant bitterness. "The sustainability features need to be foregrounded more," he murmured, making notes in the margins of the blueprint. "The whole point of this community center is to demonstrate eco-friendly building practices." Emma entered the room carrying a tray with water, and his midday medications. "Talking to yourself again?" she asked, a teasing lilt in her voice that would have been unthinkable 2 months earlier. Tom looked up, a half-smile playing at his lips. "Occupational hazard of working alone. I've always thought better out loud." The plans he was reviewing belonged to his company's newest project, a community center in a redeveloping neighborhood of Queens. It was the first work he'd engaged with since the accident, having finally responded to his business partner's increasingly urgent emails the previous week. "How's it coming along?" Emma asked, setting the tray beside him and glancing at the intricate drawings. "It's good to be using my brain for something besides self-pity," Tom admitted, taking the water glass she offered. "Though I'd forgotten how much I disagree with Philip's design aesthetic. Too much glass, not enough connection to the surrounding neighborhood." Emma smiled, recognizing the spark of passion in his voice, so different from the flat, disinterested tone that had characterized his early days of recovery. "It's nice to see you reconnecting with your work." "It's different now," Tom mused, swallowing his pills without the resistance he'd once shown. "Before, I was always focused on how impressive a building looked, how it would enhance the skyline. Now I find myself thinking about the people inside, how they'll move through the space, whether it accommodates different abilities, how it serves the community. Perspective is one of the unexpected gifts of hardship," Emma observed, adjusting the blinds to reduce the glare on his drafting table. Tom looked up at her, his expression thoughtful. "You're good at that, you know." "Good at what?" "Finding the gift inside the wound." His voice had softened, taking on a quality she'd never heard before. Seeing the possibility of growth where others see only damage. Emma felt a flush rise to her cheeks at the sincerity in his gaze. These moments had been occurring more frequently. Quiet exchanges that seemed to carry more weight than their words alone would suggest. She had become adept at steering conversations back to safer territory when they veered in this direction. "It's simply practical," she deflected, straightening items on the tray that didn't need straightening. "Focusing on what can't be changed is a waste of energy." "Emma." The way Tom said her name made her pause and meet his eyes. "It's not just practicality, it's wisdom and kindness, and I—" The front door slammed, cutting off whatever Tom had been about to say. Ashley's voice echoed through the foyer, sharp with irritation as she spoke to someone on her phone. "I don't care what the contractor says. The marble I selected is non-negotiable. If they can't source it, find someone who can." A pause. "No, I won't consider alternatives. This is a Hamilton Bennett event, not some backyard barbecue." Tom's expression closed, the openness of a moment ago replaced by a wariness that Emma had come to recognize whenever Ashley appeared after extended absences. These visits had grown increasingly tense, with Ashley seemingly annoyed by the changes in both the house and in Tom himself. "I should check on Lily," Emma said quietly, sensing the need to withdraw before Ashley entered the room. "She's working on a surprise for you." Tom nodded, his eyes communicating gratitude for her discretion. "Tell her I'm looking forward to it." Emma slipped out through the terrace doors just as Ashley swept into the living room, still speaking forcefully into her phone. As she closed the door behind her, she heard Ashley's tone shift abruptly. "Darling, you're working again. How wonderful." Emma moved across the terrace toward the garden, where Lily was carefully watering the plants they had arranged together with Tom. At 6, her daughter took this responsibility very seriously, meticulously counting the seconds for each pot, as Emma had taught her. "Is Mr. Tom done with his building pictures?" Lily asked, looking up from her task. "Can I show him my drawing now?" "Not just yet, sweetheart," Emma replied, kneeling beside her. "Miss Hamilton is visiting with him right now. We should give them some time alone." Lily's face fell slightly. She doesn't visit very much, and when she does, she makes Mr. Tom's smile go away. The simple observation, delivered with a child's unfiltered honesty, caught Emma off guard. She had noticed the same pattern, but had been careful never to comment on it, maintaining professional boundaries despite the increasingly personal nature of her role in Tom's life. "Sometimes adult relationships are complicated," she said carefully. "It's not our place to judge." Lily considered this, her small brow furrowed in concentration as she continued watering. "Grandma said you should judge a person by how they make others feel. Miss Ashley makes Mr. Tom feel sad. I can tell." Emma was saved from having to respond to this uncomfortably perceptive assessment by the sound of raised voices from inside. Through the glass doors, she could see Tom and Ashley, engaged in what appeared to be a heated argument. Ashley was gesturing emphatically at the drafting table, her face flushed with anger, while Tom sat rigidly in his wheelchair, his expression hardening into the cold mask he had worn when Emma first met him. "Why don't we go inside and get some lunch ready?" Emma suggested, gently steering Lily toward the side entrance that led to the kitchen. "It's getting hot out here." In the kitchen, Emma busied herself and Lily with lunch preparation, trying to ignore the muffled sounds of the argument continuing in the living room. She had become adept at maintaining a bubble of normalcy for Lily amid the sometimes turbulent emotional currents of the beach house. They were setting the table when Ashley burst into the kitchen, her perfect composure noticeably frayed. Her gaze landed on Emma with laser-like intensity. "This has gone far enough," she declared without preamble. "Tom tells me you've been encouraging him to believe he'll walk again." Emma straightened, meeting Ashley's accusatory stare with calm professionalism. "I've been supporting Tom in pursuing all avenues of recovery, including techniques that may stimulate neural regeneration. The results so far have been encouraging, though modest." "Modest?" Ashley repeated incredulously. "He's talking about attending site visits, about redesigning our Manhattan apartment to accommodate his current mobility needs, rather than focusing on full recovery. He's settling for this." She gestured dismissively at the wheelchair visible through the doorway, instead of fighting to get back to normal. The subtext was clear. Tom was adapting to his condition rather than holding out for the complete recovery Ashley deemed necessary. He was finding a way forward that didn't match her vision for their future. "Acceptance isn't the same as giving up," Emma said quietly, conscious of Lily watching this exchange with wide eyes. "Finding ways to live fully now doesn't mean abandoning hope for further improvement." Ashley's perfectly applied makeup couldn't conceal the flush of anger that rose to her cheeks. "Don't presume to lecture me about hope," she hissed. "I'm the one who's stood by him through this nightmare. I'm the one who hired you to help him recover, not to fill his head with butterfly metaphors and false promises." "I have never made false promises," Emma replied, her own anger rising despite her efforts to remain professional. "Every improvement Tom has experienced has been real and documented. Dr. Kaplan himself has acknowledged the progress." "Progress!" Ashley scoffed. "Wiggling toes and phantom sensations aren't progress. They're parlor tricks that distract from the real work of recovery." "That's enough, Ashley." Tom's voice cut through the tension as he wheeled himself into the kitchen doorway, his expression thunderous. "Emma has done more for my recovery, physical and mental, than all the specialists you paraded through here combined." "Because she tells you what you want to hear," Ashley countered, turning to face him. "She makes you comfortable with mediocrity instead of pushing you toward excellence. The Tom Bennett I agreed to marry wouldn't settle for partial recovery. He would demand perfection." The kitchen fell silent. Even Lily seemed to hold her breath, instinctively recognizing the gravity of the moment. Emma watched as something shifted in Tom's eyes, a final illusion falling away, revealing a clarity that seemed almost peaceful despite the circumstances. "You're right about one thing," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "The Tom Bennett you agreed to marry wouldn't settle for this. He would rage against his circumstances, demand the impossible, and destroy himself and everyone around him in the process." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "But that man died in Iceland, and I'm not sorry." Ashley recoiled as if he'd struck her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've changed, not just physically, but fundamentally. And if you can't see or accept that, then perhaps we need to reconsider more than just the apartment renovations." The implication hung in the air between them, unmistakable in its finality. Ashley's perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat, her expression cycling through shock, hurt, and finally, calculation. "This is her influence," she said, casting a venomous glance at Emma. "She's turned you against me, filled your head with working-class contentment when you're meant for greatness." "Emma has nothing to do with this decision," Tom stated firmly. "She's maintained nothing but absolute professionalism throughout my recovery. This is about us, about who we are, and what we want from life. And I think we both know it's not the same thing anymore." Ashley's composure cracked entirely, her voice rising. "So that's it? After everything I've sacrificed, you're just going to throw away our future because of a temporary setback?" "Temporary?" Tom repeated, incredulity coloring his tone. "Ashley, it's been 5 months. This isn't a sprained ankle. This is my life now. Maybe not forever, but certainly for the foreseeable future. And even if I regain the ability to walk tomorrow, I'd still be the person this experience has shaped me into." "A person I apparently don't recognize," Ashley said bitterly. "Perhaps you never really knew me to begin with," Tom suggested quietly. "Or perhaps you only wanted the parts of me that fit your vision." The truth of his words seemed to land with physical force. Ashley stood frozen for a moment, then gathered her designer handbag from the counter with deliberate movements. "I think I need some time to process this," she said, her voice brittle with controlled emotion. "I'll be staying in the city. When you come to your senses, you know where to find me." With that, she swept from the kitchen, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floors. Moments later, the front door slammed with finality, leaving a ringing silence in her wake. Emma stood motionless, acutely aware that she had just witnessed the likely end of Tom's engagement. A personal watershed that she had no right to be a part of. Professional boundaries dictated that she should create distance now, give him privacy to process the emotional aftermath. Instead, she found herself meeting his gaze across the kitchen, a wordless understanding passing between them. Without speaking, she moved to the cabinet, retrieved a glass, and filled it with water. She handed it to him, their fingers brushing momentarily in the exchange. "Thank you," he said simply, the words carrying weight beyond the simple courtesy. "You're welcome," she replied, understanding the deeper gratitude beneath his words. A small hand slipped into Emma's, drawing her attention downward. Lily looked up at her with solemn eyes. "Is Miss Ashley not coming back?" she asked. Tom answered before Emma could formulate an appropriate response. "I don't think so, Lily. At least not for a while." The child nodded, processing this information with the straightforward acceptance of youth. Then, with the remarkable resilience of children, she moved on to more immediate concerns. "Can we still have lunch? I'm really hungry." The simple question broke the tension, drawing a surprised laugh from Tom. "Yes, we can still have lunch," he confirmed, the shadow lifting somewhat from his features. "In fact, I'm starving." As Emma resumed lunch preparations, she was acutely aware that something fundamental had shifted in the dynamics of the beach house. A door had closed, perhaps permanently, on one chapter of Tom's life. What might open in its place remained. uncertain, shrouded in possibilities that both exhilarated and terrified her. For now, she would focus on the moment at hand, sharing a meal, maintaining routine, providing stability amid change. The future, with all its complexities and implications, would unfold in its own time. Like recovery, it would follow its own pattern. Not linear, but spiraling, sometimes closer, sometimes farther, but always moving toward its center. Rain lashed against the windows of the beach house, driven by fierce winds that bent the coastal pines nearly horizontal. The late summer storm had descended with unexpected ferocity, transforming the usually tranquil setting into a dramatic tableau of nature's power. Inside, the electricity had flickered several times before finally surrendering, plunging the house into dimness broken only by the strategic placement of battery-powered lanterns. Tom sat in the living room, watching the storm's fury through the reinforced glass of the oceanfront windows. The weather matched his internal landscape, turbulent, powerful, clearing away what no longer served. 2 weeks had passed since Ashley's departure. 2 weeks of silence from her end, save for a formal email from her assistant requesting that her remaining personal items be packed and sent to her Manhattan address. The practical dissolution of their relationship had been surprisingly painless, like the removal of a splinter that had been festering beneath the skin, a sharp moment of severance followed by unexpected relief. What troubled Tom more was the uncertainty of what would follow. For the first time in his adult life, he found himself without a clear blueprint for the future, navigating terrain for which he had no map. A crash of thunder rattled the windows, followed by the patter of bare feet on hardwood. Tom turned to see Lily standing in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Mr. Tom," she whispered, loudly, as if the storm might hear her, "can I sit with you? Mom said I should let you rest, but the thunder is really loud in my room." "Of course you can," Tom replied, gesturing to the sofa beside his wheelchair. The child had been staying nights at the beach house more frequently since Ashley's departure, a practical arrangement that Emma had suggested when the summer schedule made her usual childcare unavailable. Lily scrambled onto the sofa, pulling, a throw blanket around her shoulders like a cape. "I'm not scared," she clarified, even as she flinched at another thunderclap. "I just think it's better to watch storms with a friend." "I couldn't agree more," Tom said solemnly, fighting a smile at her transparent bravery. "Storms are definitely better with company." They sat in companionable silence for a few moments, watching the lightning illuminate the turbulent sea beyond. The windows. Tom had discovered, somewhat to his surprise, that he enjoyed Lily's company immensely. Unlike the adults in his life who tiptoed around his condition or projected their own anxieties onto him, Lily accepted his wheelchair as matter-of-factly as she accepted his blue eyes or his height. It was simply part of who he was. "Mum says the thunder is just the clouds bumping into each other and saying, 'Excuse me,' really loudly," Lily said, her small face serious in the lantern light. Tom chuckled. "That's one way of looking at it." "Grandma had a different story," Lily continued, settling deeper into the blanket. "She said it was the sound of old memories breaking open to make room for new ones." The poetic image struck Tom with unexpected force. "Your grandmother had a unique way of seeing the world." "That's because she saw with her heart instead of her eyes," Lily explained, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. "Mom says I have Grandma's eyes, but my own heart." "Your mother is very wise," Tom observed, his gaze drifting to the hallway where Emma had disappeared earlier. "To check the circuit breakers." "She is," Lily agreed seriously. "She knows how to fix almost anything, bodies and hearts and broken plates." She looked up at Tom with her direct gaze. "She's fixing you too, isn't she?" The simple question contained layers of meaning that Tom wasn't sure the child intended. She's helping me heal, he acknowledged carefully, both my body and other parts of me. Lily nodded, satisfied with this answer. That's what she does. That's why she has the butterfly hands. Before Tom could ask what she meant by this intriguing phrase, Emma appeared in the doorway, her figure silhouetted by the lantern she carried. "There you are," she said, spotting her daughter. "I thought we agreed you'd try to sleep." "The storm is too exciting for sleeping," Lily explained reasonably, "and Mr. Tom needed company." Emma's eyes met Tom's over her daughter's head, amusement and apology mingling in her expression. "I see. Well, the power company says we might be without electricity until morning. The storm knocked down several lines along the coast." "We'll manage," Tom said, strangely content despite the circumstances. There was something oddly comforting about the forced simplicity of the moment. No electronic devices, no medical equipment humming in the background, just the elemental sound of the storm and the warm glow of lantern light. Emma set her lantern on a side table and joined them, perching on the arm of the sofa beside Lily. In the soft light, with her hair loose around her shoulders instead of in its usual practical ponytail, she looked younger, less guarded. Tom found himself studying the curve of her cheek, the way the lantern light caught in her eyes, turning them to amber. "I was just telling Mr. Tom about Grandma's thunder story," Lily announced, breaking into Tom's thoughts. "Ah, the breaking memories," Emma smiled, stroking her daughter's hair. That was one of her favorites. "It's a beautiful way of looking at destructive forces," Tom observed. "Finding meaning in chaos." Emma nodded, her expression thoughtful. "My grandmother believed that destruction was never just an ending. It was always a necessary part of creation." "Like how you have to break eggs to make cookies," Lily interjected enthusiastically. Both adults laughed, the sound warming the room more effectively than any heater could have. "Exactly like that," Emma agreed. "Very perceptive little butterfly." The endearment triggered Tom's memory. Lily mentioned something about butterfly hands earlier. "What does that mean?" A soft smile played across Emma's lips. "It was my grandmother's term for people who had a healing touch, hands that could sense where pain lived in the body and help transform it, like a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis. She said certain people were born with it, a natural intuition for healing." "And you have it," Tom stated, rather than asked, thinking of the way her hands had always seemed to know exactly where to apply pressure during their therapy sessions, finding knots of tension he hadn't even been aware of. "According to my grandmother, yes," Emma acknowledged, a hint of color rising to her cheeks, though modern medicine might call it well-trained proprioception and observational skills. "Why does everything need a scientific explanation?" Tom wondered aloud. "Some things just are what they are, inexplicable but real." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the storm's continuing symphony and Lily's increasingly drowsy breathing. Tom found himself wishing the power outage would last longer, preserving this moment of suspended time where professional boundaries and future uncertainties seemed less pressing than the simple reality of three people finding comfort in each other's company amid nature's fury. "I should get her to bed," Emma said eventually, noticing that Lily had dozed off against her side. "Let me help," Tom offered, surprising both of them. At Emma's questioning look, he explained, "I may not be able to carry her, but I can at least light the way with one of these lanterns." Emma's expression softened with something that might have been gratitude, or perhaps something deeper. "Thank you. That would be helpful." As they made their way down the darkened hallway, Emma carrying her sleeping daughter, Tom preceding. Then with a lantern raised to illuminate their path, he was struck by how right this felt, how natural. This small domestic scene, this simple act of teamwork, contained more genuine intimacy than anything he'd experienced in years of his relationship with Ashley. At Lily's doorway, Tom paused, raising the lantern higher to cast light into the room as Emma settled her daughter into bed. He watched from the threshold as she tucked the blankets around the sleeping child with practiced movements full of tenderness. Something stirred in his chest, an ache, a longing for something he couldn't quite name but suddenly wanted with unexpected intensity. When Emma rejoined him in the hallway, gently pulling Lily's door partially closed, their eyes met in the lantern light. For a moment, neither spoke, the air between them charged with unspoken possibilities. "Thank you," Emma said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "For what?" Tom asked, equally quietly, conscious of the sleeping child just beyond the door. "For being kind to her, for making her feel welcome here. For—" Emma hesitated, seeming to search for the right words. "For seeing her, really seeing her." The simple gratitude humbled him. "She's impossible not to see," he replied honestly. "She's like a little beacon of light." Emma's smile in response was luminous, transforming her features from merely pretty to breathtaking. "She's the best of me," she said simply. They made their way back to the living room, the storm still raging outside, but somehow diminished in its power to disturb the peace they'd found within. As they settled back into their respective places, Tom in his wheelchair, Emma on the sofa, a comfortable silence enveloped them, broken only by the rhythmic percussion of rain against glass. "I've been meaning to tell you," Tom said eventually, his voice casual despite the significance of what he was about to share. "I felt sensation in my upper thighs yesterday, not just tingling but actual pressure." Emma straightened, her professional interest immediately engaged. "When? What were you doing?" "During my shower. I could feel the water hitting my skin, just patches and not very distinctly, but definitely there." He paused, watching her face. "I was waiting to tell you, until I was sure it wasn't just my imagination." That's significant progress," Emma said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. "Consistent sensory return often precedes motor function improvement." "That's what I thought you might say," Tom replied with a small smile. Always the cautious professional. Emma arched an eyebrow at his teasing tone. "Would you rather I promise miracles?" "No," he admitted, suddenly serious. "Your honesty has been one of your greatest gifts to me. That and your refusal to see me as either a lost cause or a project to be fixed." The frank admission seemed to catch Emma off guard. She looked down, her fingers tracing the pattern of the sofa cushion. "You've never been either of those things to me," she said quietly. "What have I been then?" Tom asked, the question escaping before he could consider its implications. Emma raised her eyes to his, and in them he saw a complex mixture of emotions, uncertainty, professional caution, and something warmer that made his heart beat faster. "You've been," she began, then seemed to reconsider her words. "You've been a remarkable example of human resilience, of growth through adversity." It was a safe answer, professionally appropriate, and Tom knew he should accept it as such. But something about the storm's wild energy and the intimate cocoon of lantern light made him bold. "Is that all?" he pressed gently. Emma held his gaze, a silent battle visibly waging within her. Then, with a small exhale that might have been surrender or courage, she spoke. "No," she admitted, "that's not all." The simple acknowledgement hung between them, changing everything and nothing simultaneously. Tom wanted to reach for her hand, to cross the physical distance between wheelchair and sofa that seemed suddenly symbolic of the other barriers separating them: employer and employee, patient and caregiver, man of privilege and working single mother. Before he could act on the impulse, a sudden jarring noise broke the moment. The harsh electronic ring of the landline phone, one of the few devices still functioning during the power outage. Emma rose to answer it, the spell broken. "Bennett. Residence," she said, her professional demeanor instantly restored. She listened for a moment, her expression shifting to concern. "Yes, he's here. One moment." She held out the receiver to Tom. "It's Dr. Kaplan. He says it's important." Tom took the phone, his mind racing with possibilities. The specialist, rarely called directly, usually communicating through his office staff for routine matters. "Dr. Kaplan," he greeted, trying to keep his voice steady. "What can I do for you at this hour?" As he listened to the doctor's news, Tom felt the world shift beneath him once more, not with the destructive force of the accident that had changed his life, but with the reconstructive power of possibility. Dr. Kaplan was calling about new research, a clinical trial for patients with spinal injuries similar to Tom's. The return of sensation Tom had experienced suggested he might be an ideal candidate for an experimental procedure. Not a guaranteed cure, but a significant chance at substantial recovery. When he hung up, he found Emma watching him intently, her expression guarded but hopeful. "Good news?" she asked cautiously. "Potentially life-changing news," Tom replied, his voice barely containing his excitement as he explained the doctor's call. "The trial starts in a month. If I'm accepted, it would mean relocating to Boston for at least 12 weeks of intensive treatment." Emma's face reflected genuine happiness for him, though he thought he detected a flicker of something else beneath, a shadow of what might have been regret or uncertainty. "That's wonderful, Tom. You absolutely should pursue this." "I know," he agreed, the exhilaration of possibility surging through him. Then, as the full implications registered, his enthusiasm tempered. "But it would mean changes to my care plan to this arrangement." The professional terminology felt suddenly inadequate, failing to capture what had developed between them over the months of working together. "Of course," Emma nodded, her composure perfect, but her eyes giving away more complex emotions. "We always knew your care needs would evolve with your recovery. This is a positive development." Tom studied her face in the lantern light, struck by the realization that this potential medical breakthrough, which weeks ago would have been his only focus, now came with complicated emotional considerations. The prospect of leaving this house, this makeshift family unit that had formed so unexpectedly, created an ambivalence he hadn't anticipated. "Emma," he began, uncertain how to articulate the tangle of feelings. "This doesn't have to mean—" "It's getting late," she interrupted gently but firmly. "You should rest. Tomorrow we can discuss how to adjust your therapy regimen to prepare you for the clinical trial." The deliberate step back into professional territory was clear, and Tom recognized the wisdom in it, however much another part of him wanted to press forward, to explore the unfinished conversation the phone call had interrupted. "Of course," he conceded, recognizing that the moment, whatever it had been, had passed. "Tomorrow." As Emma collected the lanterns to guide their way to their respective rooms, the storm outside began to abate, the thunder now a distant rumble, rather than the immediate crash of earlier. Tom couldn't help but think of Lily's grandmother's description, old memories breaking open to make room for new ones. Something had broken open tonight, something that couldn't be closed again quite the same way. What new creation might emerge from this necessary destruction remained to be seen. But as he wheeled himself toward his bedroom, following the glow of Emma's lantern through the darkened house, Tom found himself thinking that perhaps some questions weren't meant to be answered immediately. Like recovery, like healing, like the gradual unfurling of possibility after devastation, some revelations required patience, the courage to wait and see what might bloom from the soil of uncertainty. The late September sun cast long shadows across the terrace as Tom completed his final set of exercises, his determination evident in the beads of sweat that trickled down his temples. In the 6 weeks since Dr. Kaplan's call, his therapy regimen had intensified dramatically, preparing his body for the rigors of the clinical trial. that would begin in Boston the following week. "Excellent work," Emma said, jotting notes on his progress chart. "Your upper body strength has increased by 30% since we started this program. That's going to be crucial for the trial." Tom lowered the resistance bands, breathing heavily, but with the satisfaction of genuine exertion rather than the frustrated exhaustion that had characterized his early therapy sessions. "It's not just the strength," he observed, wiping his face with a towel. "It's the stamina. I couldn't have sustained that level of effort for half as long 2 months ago." Emma nodded, her professional pride evident as she reviewed his progress metrics. "The recovery of sensation in your thighs has been holding steady too. That's a very positive sign for the trial's potential success." The mention of the trial brought a familiar tension to the air between them, though they had settled into a pragmatic approach to preparing for his departure. Neither had revisited the unfinished conversation from the night of the storm. Instead, they had focused on measurable goals and practical arrangements, maintaining a careful distance that was neither the strictly professional relationship of their early days nor the deeper connection that had begun to form before Dr. Kaplan's call. "Have you finished packing?" Emma asked, changing the subject as she helped him transfer from the exercise chair back to his wheelchair. "Almost," Tom replied, acutely aware of her proximity during the transfer, the practiced way her hand supported his weight. "Philip is sending a car tomorrow to take me to the city. I'll spend a few days at the Manhattan apartment before flying to Boston on Monday." Emma nodded, her face composed in the neutral, supportive expression she had perfected over the past weeks. "Dr. Kaplan sent over the final care instructions this morning. I've prepared a comprehensive handover file for the Boston team, including all our therapy notes and progress markers." "Always thorough," Tom remarked with a small smile, trying to lighten the mood. "I'm sure the Boston specialists will appreciate your meticulous records." "It's important for continuity of care," Emma replied simply, gathering the therapy equipment with efficient movements that betrayed no emotion. Tom watched her, struck as always by the graceful economy of her actions, the way she moved through space with purpose and precision. He had come to know her rhythms, her habits, the subtle tells that revealed her mood despite her professional composure. Today, the tightness around her eyes and the slight furrow between her brows spoke of feelings. She wasn't expressing. "Emma," he began, then hesitated, unsure how to bridge the careful distance they'd maintained these past weeks. She paused in her task, meeting his eyes with a question in her own. "Yes?" Before he could find the words, the glass doors to the terrace slid open and Lily bounded out, clutching a colourful piece of construction paper. "Mr. Tom, I made you a special good luck card for your trip," she announced, thrusting the paper toward him with the unrestrained enthusiasm only a child could muster. "It's butterflies, see? They're flying all the way to Boston with you." Tom accepted the card, genuinely touched by the riot of colourful butterflies drawn in crayon, each with a distinctive pattern and googly eyes glued on for extra effect. "This is beautiful, Lily. Thank you. I'll keep it with me the whole time." "Mom says you'll be gone for a really long time," Lily continued, leaning against the arm of his wheelchair with the casual familiarity she'd developed over their months together. "But that's okay, because you're going to get special medicine to help your legs remember how to work." "That's right," Tom nodded, amazed as always by the child's ability to distill complex situations to their essence. "The doctors in Boston have some new ideas that might help my legs wake up more." "Will you come back when you're done?" Lily asked, her expression suddenly serious, the question carrying weight beyond her years. Tom felt Emma tense beside him, though her face revealed nothing when he glanced at her. "That's the plan," he replied carefully, addressing Lily but aware that Emma was listening intently. "This is home now." The simple statement hung in the air, laden with meaning. This beach house once a rarely used investment property where he'd spent perhaps 2 weekends a year, had transformed into a true home during his recovery. Not because of its architectural features or ocean views, but because of the life and warmth that Emma and Lily had brought into its spaces. Good, Lily declared with the matter-of-fact certainty of childhood. Because we'd miss you if you didn't, especially Mom. She gets a special wrinkle right here. She pointed between her eyebrows when she talks about you leaving. Lily, Emma interjected, a rare flush coloring her cheeks. I'm sure Mr. Bennet doesn't need to hear about my facial expressions. Tom couldn't help the smile that tugged at his lips, partly from amusement at Emma's discomfort and partly from the unexpected warmth that bloomed in his chest at the child's artless revelation. Actually, I find it very interesting. What other observations have you made, Lily? Tom, Emma warned, though there was a reluctant humor in her eyes. Mum smiles more when you're around, Lily continued, warming to her topic despite her mother's obvious embarrassment. And she does her hair different on the days you have important doctor appointments, and sometimes she looks at you when you're reading and doesn't know I'm watching her look. Okay, that's quite enough, Emma interrupted firmly, though her flush had deepened. Lily, why don't you go inside and finish your drawing for Uncle Dave? He'll be here soon to pick you up for your sleepover. Lily seemed ready to protest, but something in her mother's expression convinced her to comply. Okay. Bye, Mr. Tom. Don't forget your butterfly card in Boston. I wouldn't dare, Tom assured her solemnly, watching as she skipped back into the house, trailing childhood innocence behind her like a contrail. When the door closed behind her, an awkward silence descended on the terrace. Emma busied herself with the therapy equipment, her movements more brisk than necessary. Children and their imaginations, she said lightly, not meeting his eyes. Always creating stories out of nothing. Tom watched her, knowing the casual dismissal for what it was, a defense mechanism, a way to maintain the safe distance they'd established. In that moment, he made a decision. His departure for Boston was imminent. If he didn't speak now, these unresolved feelings would accompany him like silent passengers, distracting him from the intensive work ahead. Is that what it is? He asked quietly. Nothing. Emma's hands stilled on the resistance bands she was coiling. She kept her eyes on her task, but he could see the slight tremble in her fingers. It's complicated. I'm good with complicated, Tom said, wheeling himself closer to where she stood. I'm living complicated every day. Finally, she looked up, her professional mask slipping to reveal the conflict beneath. You're my patient, Tom, my employer. There are boundaries for good reasons. I know, he acknowledged, and I've respected those boundaries, even when I didn't want to. But I'm leaving for Boston in 2 days. After that, I won't be your patient anymore. And then what? Emma asked, a rare vulnerability in her question. You'll be in Boston for 3 months, possibly longer. You'll be focused on your recovery, as you should be. And I'll be here, continuing my work, raising my daughter. And after Boston, Tom pressed gently, when I come back here as I intend to. Emma shook her head, not in negation but in uncertainty. Tom, your life is changing again. The trial could give you back significant mobility. When that happens, you'll have options, opportunities. Your world will expand beyond this house, beyond... She hesitated. Beyond us. Morning sunlight streamed through the large windows of the therapy room as he gripped the parallel bars. His physical therapist, Dr. Jimenez, positioned before him with encouraging attention. Focus on shifting your weight gradually, she instructed, her experienced eyes missing nothing. Use your core muscles to stabilize, just like we practiced. Tom nodded, concentrating intensely as he willed his partially responsive legs to cooperate. The experimental treatment, a combination of targeted nerve stimulation, regenerative injections, and intensive physical therapy, had yielded results that even the cautiously optimistic specialist team had found remarkable. After 6 weeks, he had regained significant sensation throughout his lower limbs. By week 7, he had achieved controlled movement in his hips and knees. Now, in his 8th week, he was attempting supported standing for increasing durations. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he pushed himself up from the wheelchair, his arms bearing most of his weight initially, while his legs trembled with the effort to contribute. The sensation was extraordinary, a mixture of pain, weakness, and triumph as neural pathways long dormant reawakened to their purpose. "Excellent," Dr. Jimenez approved as he achieved a fully upright position, his hands white-knuckled on the parallel bars, but his legs bearing a portion of his weight. "Hold. For 60 seconds if you can." Tom focused on his breathing, the technique Emma had taught him months ago, coming automatically now. The thought of her brought a different kind of warmth to his chest. Their communication during his time in Boston had been regular but carefully moderated. Supportive text messages, occasional phone calls focused primarily on his medical progress, a few video chats that included Lily's enthusiastic participation. Both of them seemed to recognize the need for space during this critical phase of his recovery, allowing him to concentrate fully on the demanding treatment protocol while giving Emma time to adjust to their changed dynamic. "That's 60 seconds, Dr. Jimenez announced, breaking into his thoughts. "Do you want to try a step today?" The question sent a jolt of both fear and anticipation through Tom. A step, an actual forward movement on his own legs, represented a threshold he had only dreamed of crossing months ago. "Yes," he decided, determination overriding apprehension. "I'm ready." Dr. Jimenez positioned herself where she could provide support if needed. "Remember, it's not about distance. It's about proper form and weight transfer, quality over quantity." Tom nodded, gathering his focus. With deliberate concentration, he shifted his weight to his stronger right leg, then lifted his left foot slightly off the ground. The movement was minuscule, barely recognizable as a step to an outside observer, but it required a complex orchestration of muscles, nerves, and willpower that made it monumental in its achievement. When his left foot settled back on the ground, slightly ahead of its starting position, a wave of emotion swept through him, so powerful that for a moment he feared his legs would buckle beneath it. It wasn't just physical triumph. It was the culmination of a journey that had begun in ice and darkness on an Icelandic road and had led through pain, despair, acceptance, and finally to this moment of transcendent progress. "Well done," Dr. Jimenez said simply, her professional demeanor softened by genuine pleasure at his achievement. "That's a milestone worth celebrating." Tom lowered himself back into the wheelchair with her assistance, his arms and legs trembling with exertion, but his spirits soaring. "I need to call Emma," he said, the words escaping before he could consider their professional appropriateness. If Dr. Jimenez was surprised by his prioritization, she didn't show it. "Of course, your support system is an essential component of recovery. Take 15 minutes, then we'll continue with the core strengthening exercises." Left alone in the therapy room, Tom pulled out his phone, his fingers hovering over Emma's contact information. They had established a routine of evening calls to accommodate her work schedule with new patients, but this couldn't wait. This step, literal and figurative, felt like a threshold crossed that needed to be shared with the person who had made it possible. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice concerned at the unexpected timing. "Tom, is everything all right?" "I took a step," he said without preamble, his voice thick with emotion he didn't try to hide. "Just now, during therapy, a real step, on my own legs." The silence on the other end lasted only a heartbeat before Emma responded, her professional composure giving way to genuine joy. "Oh, Tom, that's That's incredible. It was small, he clarified, not wanting to oversell the achievement. More of a shuffle than a proper step, but it was controlled, intentional. The last word hung between them, an acknowledgement of the connection they'd both felt, but carefully avoided naming. "That's what you're worried about?" Tom asked, realization dawning. "That if I recover more function, I'll somehow outgrow what's developed here." "Wouldn't you?" Emma challenged quietly. "Be honest, Tom. Before the accident, would you have seen a future with someone like me? A home care nurse with a young child, no family connections, no wealth or social standing?" Didi. The directness of her question caught him off guard, but he appreciated her honesty too much to offer anything less in return. "Before the accident, no," he admitted. "But not because of your profession or circumstances, because I was too shallow, too focused on appearances and status to recognize real value when I saw it." He reached for her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she allowed him to take it. "The accident didn't just break my spine, Emma. It broke open my life, showed me what was hollow at its core, and what grew in that broken space. What you and Lily helped nurture there is more real than anything I had before." Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her usual composure wavering. "You say that now, but—" "I know what I feel," Tom interrupted gently but firmly. "I've spent 5 months healing not just my body but my understanding of what matters. And what matters to me is here, in this house that you've turned into a home. With you." The confession lingered between them, honest and unvarnished. Emma looked down at their joined hands, her thumb unconsciously tracing circles on his wrist. "I can't ask you to put your life on hold while I'm in Boston," Tom continued softly. "But I'm asking if you'll be open to exploring what's between us when I return. Not as caregiver and patient, not as employer and employee, but as two people who've found something unexpected and precious amid tragedy." Emma was silent for a long moment, her inner conflict visible in the play of emotions across her face. "You once asked me what you'd been to me," she said finally. "More than a patient, more than a case study in resilience." Tom nodded, remembering the interrupted conversation from the night of the storm. "You've been a revelation," Emma admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, a reminder that strength isn't always what we think it is, that healing happens in unexpected ways, that— She faltered, then continued with quiet conviction. "That the heart has its own wisdom, separate from what the mind thinks is sensible." Didikis, the echo of her grandmother's philosophy in her words, wasn't lost on Tom. "So what is your heart's wisdom telling you now?" he asked. Emma met his gaze directly, vulnerability and courage mingling in her expression. "That some journeys are worth taking, even when the destination isn't certain." The simple truth of her answer resonated between them. Tom raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles, a promise, a beginning. "Then we'll both be on journeys these next few months, and afterward, we'll see where those journeys have led us," Emma finished. For him, a tentative smile softening her features, "One step at a time, as with all healing." "One step at a time," Tom agreed, the phrase holding new meaning, new possibility. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting the terrace in golden light, they remained like that. Hands joined, a bridge formed across the space that had separated them. No dramatic declarations, no sweeping promises, just the quiet acknowledgement of feelings too significant to ignore and a willingness to see where they might lead. It was, Tom reflected, the most honest beginning he'd ever experienced. One built not on external perfection or social expectation, but on mutual respect, shared growth, and the profound connection that can form when two people witness each others' vulnerabilities, and find strength in them rather than weakness. Tomorrow would bring packing and preparations, goodbyes and uncertainties. Boston waited with its medical promise and challenges. But in this moment, as the day's light softened toward evening, Tom felt a certainty that transcended his physical condition or the outcome of any clinical trial. Whatever healing awaited him in Boston, he was already whole in ways that mattered. Most, his spirit reconnected to purpose, his heart opened to love, his understanding of life's value fundamentally transformed. And that, he knew with unshakable clarity, was a recovery more profound than he could have imagined in those dark days after the accident, when all he could see was what he had lost, rather than what he might yet find. The Rehabilitation Center in Boston hummed with quiet efficiency, the atmospheric blend of antiseptic cleanliness and determined hope now familiar to Tom after 8 weeks of intensive treatment. Size doesn't matter, Emma replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. It's the neural pathways being re-established that count. This confirms what we've hoped. The connections are reforming. Even in her excitement, she remained the thoughtful medical professional, understanding the physiological significance beyond the emotional victory. It was this blend of compassionate humanity and knowledgeable expertise that had drawn him to her from the beginning, though he had been too lost in his own darkness to recognize it at first. The team here is cautiously optimistic about continued progress, Tom continued, shifting slightly to ease the pleasant ache in his muscles. Dr. Kaplan says I'm responding to the treatment better than 90% of the trial participants. That doesn't surprise me, Emma said warmly. You've always been an exceptional patient once you decided to be. The gentle teasing made him laugh, remembering his early resistance to her care. I had an exceptional therapist who wouldn't let me surrender to self-pity. You did the work, Emma countered. I just provided the framework. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with unspoken emotions that had grown during their separation. Finally, Tom asked the question that had been on his mind increasingly as his Boston treatment progressed. How are things there, with your new patients? Emma hesitated before answering, and he could picture her tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a habit she had when considering her words carefully. They're fine. Standard cases, mostly post-operative recovery care. Nothing as challenging as what I experienced with you. The careful phrasing made Tom smile. You mean none of them started out as complete jerks who made your job unnecessarily difficult? Her laugh, warm and genuine, traveled through the phone line like a caress. I was going to say, none of them have shown such remarkable resilience and capacity for growth. But your description works too. Another pause, then she continued more softly. Lily asks about you every day. She's keeping a journal of things to tell you when you come back. It's up to 17 pages now, with illustrations. The mention of the child sent a wave of affection through Tom's chest. I miss her too, both of you, he added, the simple truth emerging naturally. Tom, Emma began, then hesitated. He could hear the complexity of emotions in just that single syllable of his name. This step you've taken, it changes things, doesn't it? Your prognosis, your future plans. The question touched on conversations. They'd skirted around during their communications over the past weeks, the uncertain future that lay beyond his treatment, the possibilities that expanded with each small victory of his recovery. Yes and no, Tom answered honestly. It changes what might be physically possible for me, but not what I want. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Emma, taking this step today made me realize something important. All these months, I've been focused on regaining what I lost. Mobility, independence, capability. But what matters more are the things I've found along the way. What things? She asked softly, and he could hear in her voice that she understood the significance of the conversation they were having. Purpose beyond profit, strength beyond physical ability, connections based on who I am, not what I have. He took a deep breath, and people who see me really see me at my worst and still believe in my best. The silence that followed held no awkwardness, only the weight of mutual understanding. The doctors say I might be able to come home earlier than expected, Tom continued, his heart beating faster at the word home and all it now represented. Not permanently. I'll need to return for follow-up treatments, but they believe I could continue some of the therapy regimen locally after another few weeks here. That's wonderful news, Emma replied, and he could hear the genuine pleasure in her voice, though tempered with something else. Caution, perhaps, or professional reserve reasserting itself. I'm sure you're eager to get back to your own space. I'm eager to get back to the people who make it home, Tom corrected gently, if they still want me there. Emma's breath caught audibly. Tom, She stopped, and he heard a muffled sound as if she'd covered the phone momentarily. When she returned, her voice was apologetic. I'm sorry. I have to go. Mrs. Abernathy's nurse is calling, and it might be urgent. Can we talk tonight during our regular call? Of course, Tom agreed, understanding the responsibilities that defined her days. I should get back to therapy anyway. Dr. Jimenez has a robust set of core exercises waiting for me. Don't overdo it, she cautioned, the professional therapist, momentarily taking precedence over the woman who had almost revealed more personal feelings. Quality over quantity, always. You sound like my therapist here, Tom noted with a smile. Great minds, Emma replied, a smile evident in her voice as well. I'll talk to you tonight. After they disconnected, Tom sat for a moment gathering his thoughts before returning to the demanding physical work ahead. The step he had taken today represented more than physical progress. It was a threshold crossed in his understanding of what recovery truly meant. Not a return to what had been, but an evolution into something new, potentially stronger and more meaningful than before. As he wheeled himself back toward the therapy area where Dr. Jimenez waited, Tom felt a sense of purpose and clarity that transcended his physical condition. Whatever mobility he ultimately regained, whether it was the ability to walk independently or merely to stand for short periods, he had already recovered the most essential elements of a full life: meaning, connection, and the capacity to grow through adversity rather than be diminished by it. And for that recovery, the one that had healed not just his body but his perspective, he had Emma Wilson and her remarkable daughter to thank. A debt he hoped to have a lifetime to repay. The familiar scent of salt water and pine greeted Tom as Philip's driver opened the car door outside the beach house. After 12 weeks in Boston, the simple sensory experience of home hit him with unexpected emotional force. He maneuvered himself from the car seat to his wheelchair with practiced efficiency, noticing how much easier the transfer had become since the last time he had made this journey. Everything's been prepared according to your instructions, sir, the driver informed him, retrieving Tom's luggage from the trunk. Mr. Harrington asked me to tell you he'll call tomorrow to discuss the Queen's project updates. Thank you, James, Tom replied, his attention already fixed on the house before him. Lights glowed warmly behind the large windows, and he could see movement inside, Emma preparing for his arrival, no doubt with her characteristic attention to detail. The past 4 weeks, since their conversation about his first step, had been filled with accelerated progress. Tom had graduated from parallel bars to a walker, achieving limited but increasingly controlled mobility. The experimental treatment had exceeded even the specialist's expectations, though they remained carefully measured in their long-term prognosis. Significant improvement likely, full recovery uncertain, had become the cautious mantra of his medical team. Tom had embraced This measured optimism, finding in it a reflection of the balanced perspective he had developed during his recovery. The man who had once demanded perfection, or nothing at all, had learned to value incremental progress, to find victory in small advances rather than only in complete conquest. As James carried his bags toward the house, Tom remained for a moment. In the driveway, taking in the peaceful evening scene, the early December air carried a crisp chill, the sky above perfectly clear and scattered with stars. He had specifically requested that Emma not meet him outside, wanting to navigate the familiar territory on his own first, testing his increased independence. The front door opened, spilling additional light onto the porch, and Tom felt his heart rate quicken at the silhouette that appeared there. Despite his request, Emma had come out to welcome him, standing in the doorway with an expression that even at this distance conveyed a mixture of professional assessment and personal joy. "You're early," she called, descending the porch steps, with the graceful efficiency he had come to associate with her movements. "The GPS tracker said you were still 30 minutes out." Tom wheeled himself forward to meet her halfway up the path. "James knows all the shortcuts from the airport," he explained, drinking in the sight of her. She looked both familiar and somehow new, the same Emma with her practical ponytail and clear eyes, but with a brightness about her that seemed to have intensified during their separation. "You look well," she observed, her clinical gaze traveling over him with professional assessment that couldn't quite mask the personal warmth beneath. "Boston agreed with you." "Boston had excellent medical facilities," Tom replied with a small smile. "But I wouldn't say it agreed with me nearly as well as coming home does." The word hung between them, its meaning evolved beyond mere physical location. Emma's expression softened, professional reserve giving way momentarily to the more personal connection they had acknowledged, but not fully explored, before his departure. "Well, home is ready for you," she said, stepping aside as they reached the porch, complete with a welcome committee who has been counting down the days with remarkable precision. As if on cue, a small figure appeared in the doorway, vibrating with barely contained excitement. "Mr. Tom, you're back!" Lily exclaimed, clearly restraining herself from launching forward only through what must have been prior instruction from her mother about giving Tom space. "I am indeed," Tom confirmed, his smile widening at the sight of her. She appeared to have grown at least an inch during his absence, though her exuberance remained unchanged. "And I understand you've been keeping a very important journal that I need to read." Lily's face lit up with delight. 29 pages now, with pictures and pressed flowers from the garden and everything that happened while you were gone. "Mom said we can go through it after dinner because you might be tired from your trip." "Your mom is very wise," Tom acknowledged, exchanging a warm glance with Emma, "but I'm definitely looking forward to hearing all your news." As they moved into the house, Tom was struck by the subtle changes that had occurred in his absence. The space remained familiar in its architecture and primary features, but new touches had appeared, additional plants in the living area, a collection of books that hadn't been there before, a child's art project displayed prominently on a side table. The house had continued evolving into a home, the process he had initiated with Emma and Lily continuing even during his treatment away. "We've made some adjustments based on your updates from Boston," Emma explained as they moved through the foyer. "The therapy room has been reconfigured for the next phase of your recovery program, and we've installed the recommended bathroom modifications." Her tone was professional, focused on the practical aspects of his care, but Tom could detect the underlying current of personal investment in her preparations. This wasn't merely a job to her anymore, if it ever truly had been. "Thank you," he said simply, knowing she would understand the gratitude extended beyond the physical accommodations. Dinner was a lively affair, with Lily dominating the conversation, as she attempted to compress 12 weeks of experiences into a single meal's worth of narrative. Tom found himself watching the interactions between mother and daughter with a sense of homecoming that transcended the physical space around them. This, he realized, was what had been missing from his life before the accident. Not just romance or companionship, but this sense of belonging to a unit larger than himself, of being part of a shared daily experience that gave meaning to ordinary moments. After Lily had been persuaded to save some of her stories for the promised journal review session later, and the meal had been cleared, Emma suggested they move to the living room where Tom could be more comfortable. The routine of it, her anticipating his needs without making him feel diminished by them, struck him anew with its delicate balance of care and respect. "Actually," Tom said, "I thought I might show you something first." Emma paused, curiosity evident in her expression. "Of course." Tom wheeled himself to a clear space between the dining area and the living room, positioning his chair for what he was about to attempt. He engaged the brakes, ensuring the wheelchair was secure, then looked up at Emma and Lily, who watched him with curious anticipation. "The Boston team suggested I limit demonstrations until I'd had a chance to rest after the journey," he explained, a hint of the old defiant Tom showing through. "But I've never been particularly good at following medical advice that conflicts with what I want." Emma's eyebrow arched in knowing agreement, though concern flickered across her features. "Tom, if Dr. Kaplan recommended waiting—" "Just a short demonstration," he assured her. "I've been practicing for weeks, specifically for this moment." With that, he reached for the walker that James had brought in with his luggage, positioning it in front of his wheelchair. Taking a deep breath, Tom placed his hands on the armrests of his chair and pushed himself upward, his leg muscles engaging in the movement he had rehearsed countless times during his final weeks in Boston. The transition from seated to standing was still awkward, requiring significant upper body strength to compensate for his still recovering legs, but the movement was controlled and deliberate. Within moments, Tom stood upright, his hands gripping the walker for support, but his legs bearing a significant portion of his weight. The small gasp from Emma was almost inaudible, but it sent a surge of satisfaction through him. Lily had no such restraint, clapping her hands together with unabashed delight. "You're standing! Like, really standing!" she exclaimed, bouncing slightly in her excitement. "Mum, look, the butterflies worked!" Emma's professional composure had given way entirely to genuine emotion, her eyes bright with unshed tears as she took in the sight of Tom standing before her. "I can see that," she managed, her voice not quite steady. "That's remarkable progress. Tom." "Not finished yet," he said with a small grin, relishing the moment but also determined to complete what he had planned. With careful concentration, he shifted his weight to his stronger right leg, then moved his left foot forward, followed by the walker, then his right foot. One complete step, then another. Slow, measured movements that represented countless hours of grueling therapy and unwavering determination. By the third step, he stood directly in front of Emma, close enough to see the play of emotions across her face. Professional pride, personal joy, and something deeper that made his heart race despite the physical exertion of his demonstration. "Hi," he said softly, looking down at her from his standing height for the first time. "It's nice to see you from this angle." Emma laughed, a sound caught between joy and overwhelmed emotion. "It's nice to be seen from this angle," she replied, her eyes never leaving his. "Though you've always seen me clearly, regardless of your position." The moment stretched between them, intimate despite Lily's presence, charged with all that remained unspoken during their separation. Then, practical as always, Emma gestured toward the living room. "You should sit before you overexert yourself," she suggested, her professional concern reasserting itself. "That was incredible, but I suspect it took more energy than you're letting on." Tom conceded with a nod, allowing her to help guide him to the sofa rather than back to his wheelchair. Another small victory, another step toward normalcy, however modified it might be from his previous life. Once they were settled in the living room, Lily proudly produced her journal, a construction paper-covered notebook bulging with pressed flowers, drawings, and carefully printed accounts of daily life during Tom's absence. As she began walking him through the pages, Emma excused herself briefly to prepare tea, giving Tom a moment alone with the child who had become such an unexpected but essential part of his life. "And this is when we saw the baby sea turtles," Lily was explaining, pointing to a somewhat abstract drawing of small green shapes heading toward blue scribbles. "Mom said they have to find their own way to the ocean with no help, but people can make it easier by turning off lights and not leaving trash on the beach." "That's very wise of your mum," Tom agreed, genuinely charmed by the child's earnest documentation of events, both significant and mundane. Lily looked up from her journal, her expression suddenly serious in that disconcerting way children have of shifting from carefree to profound in an instant. "Mom cried sometimes when you were gone," she said matter-of-factly. "Not sad crying." "Exactly. More like thinking crying. She did it when she thought I was asleep, but sometimes I wasn't." The simple observation caught Tom off guard, its implications sending a surge of emotion through his chest. Before he could formulate a response, Lily continued, her child's perception cutting to the heart of adult complexities with uncanny accuracy. "I think she was scared," she confided, lowering her voice slightly, though Emma was still in the kitchen. "Not scared like monsters or thunderstorms, scared like when you really want something but you don't know if you can have it." "That's a very grown-up kind of scared," Tom acknowledged, wondering at the wisdom contained in this small being. "Adults feel that too, sometimes even more than children do." Lily nodded solemnly. "Are you scared too?" The direct question, delivered without guile or judgment, deserved an equally honest answer. "Yes," Tom admitted, matching her seriousness. "Sometimes, not of thunderstorms or monsters either, but of missing chances for happiness because of fear." The child considered this thoughtfully. "Grandma said that scared feelings are just butterflies, trying to show you where to go, but people get confused and run away instead of following them." Tom smiled at the butterfly metaphor that seemed to permeate the Wilson family philosophy. "Your grandma sounds like she was very smart about feelings." "The smartest," Lily agreed, just as Emma returned with a tray of tea and hot chocolate. The evening unfolded with a comfortable rhythm, Lily sharing more of her journal until her yawns became too frequent to ignore. Emma gently enforcing bedtime despite the child's protests that this was a special occasion, Tom promising to review the remaining pages tomorrow. The domestic scene carried a sense of rightness that transcended the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. After Lily had finally been persuaded to bed, with Tom formally inducted into the bedtime story rotation as a welcome home privilege, he and Emma found themselves alone in the living room. The air between them seemed charged with all that had developed during their months of working together, all that had been acknowledged but not fully explored before his departure for Boston, and all that remained to be determined about their future. Emma curled into the corner of the sofa, her professional demeanor softening into something more personal now that her daughter was settled for the night. "You've made remarkable progress," she observed, her clinical assessment unable to mask the deeper emotions beneath. "The Boston team must be extremely pleased." "They are," Tom confirmed, though they're careful not to make promises about how much more function I might regain. "The consensus seems to be that I'll likely need some form of mobility assistance. Long-term, but with continued work, I should achieve a significantly higher level of independence than initially projected." Emma nodded, understanding the medical implications and the balanced perspective such a prognosis required. "And how do you feel about that?" she asked, the question extending beyond his physical condition to encompass his acceptance of a life different from what he had once envisioned. Tom considered carefully before answering. "Before the accident, I would have considered anything short of complete recovery to be failure," he admitted. "Now, I see it differently. Each step is a gift, not a compromise. Each bit of independence regained is something to celebrate, not a partial victory to resent." He shifted slightly on the sofa, turning more fully toward her. "But the physical progress, as meaningful as it is, isn't what I value most from these past months." Emma met his gaze, a question in her eyes. "What do you value most, then?" "The perspective shift," Tom replied without hesitation. "Learning that strength comes in many forms, that surrender isn't always defeat. Sometimes it's just making space for something new to emerge." He paused, gathering courage for what he wanted to say next, and that sometimes it takes breaking apart completely to discover what you're truly made of. Emma's eyes softened with understanding. "The scars that bloom," she murmured. "Exactly," Tom agreed, recognizing the echo of the wisdom she had offered him in his darkest days. "You saw that possibility in me before I could see it in myself. You kept believing in it when I was determined to prove you wrong." "I recognize something in you," Emma acknowledged quietly. "A capacity for growth that was dormant but not destroyed. The same thing my grandmother saw in her patients, not just what they had lost, but what they might become through the journey of recovery." "You changed my life," Tom said simply. "Not just through your professional skills, though. Those were exceptional. But through your perspective, your compassion, your refusal to let me surrender to bitterness." Emma's cheeks colored slightly at the praise. "You did the work, Tom. I just provided guidance." "It was more than that," he insisted gently. "You and Lily, you became the reason I wanted to get better, not just physically, but as a person. Someone worthy of the faith you placed in me." The admission hung between them, honest and unvarnished. Emma looked down at her hands for a moment, seemingly gathering her thoughts, then raised her eyes to meet his directly. "These past months, while you were in Boston," she began, her voice soft but steady, "they gave me time to think about what happened here before you left, about boundaries crossed and feelings acknowledged, about what might be possible and what might be unwise." Tom felt his heart beat faster, uncertain where her reflections had led her. "And what conclusions did you reach?" Emma's expression held a vulnerability he had rarely glimpsed beneath her composed exterior. That some risks are worth taking, even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. That sometimes the most unlikely paths lead to exactly where we need to be. She paused, a small smile touching her lips. "And that my daughter has an uncanny ability to see truths that adults try to complicate." "Lily is extraordinary," Tom agreed, hope building in his chest at the direction of Emma's words, "much like her mother." "She told me something interesting while you were gone," Emma continued, her fingers absently tracing patterns on the sofa, cushion between them. "She said that when she grows up, she wants to help people find their butterflies, just like her grandma did, and just like I do. When I asked what she meant, she said, 'You know, Mom, the butterflies that live inside people, waiting to come out when they're ready.'" Tom smiled, enchanted as always by the child's perspective, wise beyond her years. "She also said," Emma added, her voice taking on a quality he hadn't heard before, intimate and slightly tentative, "that she thought you had very colorful butterflies, and that's why you needed us to help them wake up." The simple observation, filtered through a child's understanding but profound in its insight, brought unexpected emotion to Tom's throat. She was right, he managed after a moment. I needed you both more than I could have imagined, more than I deserved. Emma reached across the space between them, her hand finding his in a gesture that bridged professional distance and personal connection. Healing isn't about deserving, Tom. It's about possibility, about what can grow in broken places when they're tended with care. His fingers interlaced with hers, the simple touch conveying more than elaborate declarations could have. And what do you think could grow here, Emma? Between us? She met his gaze directly, the caution of the professional caregiver giving way to the honesty of the woman beneath. Something real, she said simply. Something built on seeing each other clearly, at our strongest and our most vulnerable. Something worth exploring, step by careful step, just like your recovery. No promises beyond honesty and effort, but with all the possibility that comes when two people choose to walk a path together, supporting each other along the way. The measured hope in her words resonated perfectly with the perspective Tom had developed through his healing journey. Not the desperate all-or-nothing passion of his younger days, nor the calculated social alliance he had formed with Ashley, but something more sustainable and ultimately more profound, a connection rooted in mutual growth, shared values, and genuine care. Step by careful step, he echoed, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. I like that approach. Emma smiled, the expression lighting her features in a way that made his heart constrict with affection. It's served us well so far, she pointed out, in therapy and beyond. Speaking of steps, Tom said, a hint of mischief entering his expression, would it be overexerting myself to take one more important one this evening? Emma's eyebrow arched in professional concern, though her eyes remained warm. That depends entirely on what step you're contemplating. With deliberate care, Tom shifted closer on the sofa, his movements more fluid than they would have been months ago, but still requiring conscious effort. The distance between them narrowed, until they were close enough to share breath, his hand still entwined with hers between them. This one, he murmured, and with gentle determination he closed the final space between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that held all the tenderness and promise of new beginnings. Emma responded with equal gentleness, her free hand rising, to rest against his cheek in a touch that felt like both blessing and claim. The kiss remained soft, exploratory, neither of them rushing what both sensed was the first of many such moments, the initial step on a shared path that would unfold according to its own organic rhythm. When they separated, Tom rested his forehead against hers, a smile playing at his lips. Worth any amount of physical therapy, he murmured. Emma laughed softly, the sound vibrating between them. I'm not sure Dr. Kaplan would approve of that particular motivation for recovery. Probably not, Tom agreed, reluctantly creating a small space between them, though his hand remained entwined with hers. But I think your grandmother would understand perfectly. She would, Emma nodded, her eyes bright with emotion and possibility. She always said that the heart has its own healing timeline, separate from the body's, that sometimes they align and sometimes they don't, but both journeys are equally important. Your grandmother, Tom observed, should have written a book. The world needs that kind of wisdom. She did, in a way, Emma replied. She wrote it in the lives she touched, the people she helped find their way back to wholeness. It's just not the kind of book you find on shelves. The profound simplicity of her perspective struck Tom anew, reminding him of all the reasons this remarkable woman had catalyzed such transformation in his life. Not just her professional skills or her compassionate care, but her fundamental understanding of what healing truly meant, not a return to what was, but an evolution into something potentially stronger, more authentic, and more beautiful than before. As they sat together in the gentle quiet of the evening, hands intertwined, and possibilities unfolding before them, Tom felt a sense of homecoming that transcended physical location. He had embarked on this recovery journey, focused solely on regaining what he had lost, never imagining that what he might find instead would be something he had never truly possessed before, a connection based on authentic self rather than external trappings, a purpose larger than personal ambition, and a love that saw clearly and valued deeply. In the garden of his broken places, something unexpected had indeed bloomed, not despite his scars, but because of them. And for that transformation he felt a gratitude beyond words, knowing that some journeys, while painful in their unfolding, lead precisely where we need to go, especially when, it isn't where we thought we were headed. The spring sunshine filtered through the windows of the physical therapy room, creating dappled patterns across the hardwood floor as Tom concentrated on his balance exercises. 6 months had passed since his return from Boston, months filled with steady progress, occasional setbacks, and the gradual integration of his recovery journey with the new life taking shape around him. "Focus on your core," Emma instructed from beside him, her voice carrying the professional tone she maintained during their therapy sessions, despite the evolution of their personal relationship. "Don't let your right side compensate for the left." Tom adjusted his stance slightly, finding the proper alignment that distributed his weight more evenly. He stood without a walker now, using only a single cane for support during more demanding exercises like this one. The Boston treatment protocol, combined with Emma's intuitive approach to his ongoing therapy, had yielded results that continued to surprise even the specialists who monitored his progress. "Better," Emma approved, her critical eye missing. "Nothing. Now hold that for 30 seconds, then we'll try the step sequence." As Tom maintained the challenging position, he reflected on the dual nature of their relationship these past months, the careful separation they maintained between therapy sessions and personal time, between Emma, the skilled professional, and Emma, the woman who had become central to his life beyond recovery. In the beginning, they had both worried about the potential complications of this arrangement. Emma had initially suggested transferring his care to another therapist, concerned about maintaining clinical objectivity. But after consulting with Dr. Kaplan and considering the specialized knowledge she had developed of Tom's specific case, they had decided to continue their professional relationship alongside the personal one, with clearly defined boundaries, and regular consultations with the Boston team to ensure his therapy remained optimally effective. "Time," Emma announced, consulting her watch. "Ready for the sequence?" Tom nodded, shifting his weight in preparation for the series of movements. They had been refining for weeks, a pattern of steps designed to improve his gait stability and build endurance. As he began the carefully choreographed routine, moving in a modified figure-8 pattern around the room, he felt the now familiar integration of conscious control and muscle memory, his body remembering more with each session how to perform. Movements that had once been automatic. From the doorway came the sound of quiet clapping, and Tom looked up to see Lily watching, her face alight with excitement. "Uncle Dave said I could come watch for a minute before my piano lesson," she explained, bouncing slightly on her toes. "You're walking so good now, Mr. Tom." Emma gave her daughter an indulgent smile. "Very well, not so good," she corrected gently. "And yes, Tom is making excellent progress. Now scoot along to Dave, please. We'll finish up here soon." "Can we have ice cream after my lesson?" Lily negotiated, already backing toward the doorway. "To celebrate Tom's walking and my new song?" "We'll discuss it later," Emma replied, though the twinkle in her eye suggested the outcome of that discussion was already determined. As Lily disappeared down the hallway, Tom completed his sequence, ending back at the starting point with more confidence than he had shown in previous sessions. The improvement was incremental, but unmistakable, each day bringing slightly more. Fluidity, slightly less dependence on the cane, slightly greater endurance. That was your best run yet, Emma noted, professional satisfaction evident in her voice as she made notes on his progress chart, particularly the weight transfer on the diagonal steps. I had good motivation, Tom replied with a smile, easing himself onto the therapy bench to rest. Ice cream is a powerful incentive. Emma laughed, the sound still capable of warming his chest even after months of hearing it regularly. For Lily, certainly. I'm not sure it holds the same appeal for you. Not the ice cream itself, Tom clarified, his voice softening. The family outing it represents.